Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Joe Saz here from BLOCKTV. I'm going to bring you guys a very special guest, Giacomo Zucco, and we're going to discuss Bitcoin maximalism, and we're going to counter some of the points made by Matt Hamilton, who represented XRP recently, brilliantly, of course. I see there's a few people waiting, so I jumped in a little bit early so that we can hang out. If you guys have any questions, you can go ahead and ask. We could kind of line this up. So just we're just waiting for Giacomo to join. Should be momentarily, next few minutes. And if you have any questions, just ask. We can have kind of like a little pre-game here. So um, I'll just be hanging out. Um, I guess I could start on talking why I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. A lot of people say they're in it for the tech. I say I'm in it for the revolution. That's the thing that's been driving me for a very long time in my research and my understanding of the world. I've seen that certain influencers have very large impact, central authorities in particular, sovereign, corporate, whatever you want to call them, maybe even entities above that. So Bitcoin is kind of this, there's this thought that I have sometimes where it's, say I was, oh, hey,
Hey, do you hear me?
yep, I hear you just fine. How's it going, Giacomo?
Fine, thank you. Sorry for the delay, but logistical problems.
Not a problem at all. We're happy to have you here. Hopefully, we'll get some questions, but yeah, so I'm looking forward to this. I had a nice discussion. I don't know if you know, I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm a Bitcoin maximalist as well. An education, I was a theoretical physicist. I worked for a while, for 4 years, in legacy payment systems for a multinational. And in 2013, I quit my job to do Bitcoin stuff.
Uh-huh.
Initially, I basically participated to many startups frenetically. I was like a compulsive entrepreneur. I worked with many smart guys in Switzerland, Italy, Malta, Panama. And then in 2015, I created a Bitcoin centered research and development center in Milan, Italy. So I came back home and I managed that for with my wife for 3 years. It was great. We hosted the Berlin Bitcoin conference. We helped the creation of the Bolt protocol and the Open Timestamps protocol. We
Hmm.
supported the ecosystem a lot. Right now, I moved to Switzerland, and I am an educator and a consultant, mostly about Bitcoin. So it's 99% of what I do, talk about, think about. Home, at work, before sleeping, and after waking up. So yeah, I'm pretty much a maximalist myself.
Yeah. Would you say you're doing something that you both enjoy and brings you fulfillment and also pays bills?
Yeah, exactly. It brings us fulfillment in a particular way, which is bridging together many different aspects of our life. So before Bitcoin, I had a political commitment to some causes that were like privacy, financial privacy, or sound money, Austrian economics, cypherpunk ideology. But
Hmm.
these were just on one side, and then there was my job, the way to provide for my family, personal investments on another side, somehow distinguished. Then there was my experience in technology and payments that was still distinguished. Bitcoin started to basically connect. It's very it's a totalitarian project. It connects every single aspect of your life. And then after so many years working on Bitcoin, now most of getting to know many of the smarter people I've ever known in my life. Now many of my friends are in Bitcoin. Many of my personal relationships are in Bitcoin. So yeah, let's say that I didn't apply diversification of life investment very well, because right
Yeah.
now all my eggs are in the Bitcoin basket.
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree that there's exceptions to the don't have all your eggs in one basket rule. I think when you're talking Bitcoin, to me, it's the best chance that this world has at a fair fight against. the people that Bitcoin was created to fight, right? Corporations, sovereign entities, and whoever else is up at the top of the pyramid. So I
Bitcoin,
agree.
yeah, more than the egg and basket metaphor, Bitcoin is most is closest to something like a Pascal wager.
Mm,
Basically, if Bitcoin succeed, we can do whatever we want with our money. If Bitcoin fails, I mean, it's not that I don't care for Bitcoin. Still, if to move my money, I mean, if I'm rich and Bitcoin failed, and in order to move my money, I have to submit 3 days of paperwork to some kind of central authority. I lose anyway. So it's
mhm,
a win-lose situation. If Bitcoin succeed, we really enter a new phase, a new one. If Bitcoin fails, it's more about the same. Sure, it would be nice to have made some dollars with trading in this hype, but it's not
mhm.
what really matters.
Yeah, so why don't we start there? Like scenarios. I mean, I personally don't see much holding Bitcoin back. I think as far as global adoption is concerned, the Lightning Network, which is something that there's a lot of FUD surrounding for some reason. That's kind of like the gateway to Bitcoin being everything that it already promises, a store of value, and then in addition to that, a medium of exchange. So that's, to me, Bitcoin is kind of like the one and all, right? It has, especially once the Lightning Network is fully operational, which arguments can be made. It's not. It's a let's say a 7 out of 10, where many want it to be a 10 out of 10 or something like that. Now, do you want to
Yeah.
talk about Bitcoin? Is it going to survive? Is it going to fail? Where do you think it lands on that spectrum and why?
So, of course, the fulfillment of all the feature of good money is not synchronous, is not instantaneous. Probably we will see the store of value function of Bitcoin being preferred for a long time before the medium of exchange, because even if we have the beta version of Lightning Network pretty functional and pretty promising, still the point about volatility is that if an asset is going to become money, so if the demand for that asset is going to grow with adoption, of course, there is a preference over saving that and spending the bad money first. So if you, but that's natural, right? If you are in
Mhm,
Venezuela and you have some bolivars in your pocket and some US dollars in your pocket, yeah, but dollars are better money than bolivars. But first, if you can, you tend to spend, you tend to use bolivars
Hey,
as a
hey, hey,
medium of
hey, hey,
exchange.
hey, Roxy, Roxy.
I,
Sorry
I
about that.
disagree. He's a shitcoin fan. He disagrees.
The dog is a multi-coiner. Hey, calm down, baby. Calm down, baby.
Anyway, the point about failure scenarios, I don't see many anymore. It's still, I will still give out of precaution 10-20% chance that Bitcoin may fail. The more realistic, but it's getting thinner and thinner every day, the
Mhm,
chance. The most realistic failure scenarios that I see right now are, first, the features that we are expecting Bitcoin to fulfill are not really interesting at all for a significant enough group of people in order to sustain a significant system long run. So maybe Bitcoin will survive as a niche, but financial privacy and sound money, so financial reliability of the asset, people in majority they just don't care. They are happy with financial surveillance and with
mhm,
infinite inflation. I don't think this is true. I think this is a very unlikely scenario. I think that people in need for financial privacy and financial stability of the asset are not just libertarian Austrian economists or cypherpunk. We are the guys who are theorizing this kind of need. We are elaborating philosophically this kind of needs, and we are promoting as activists this kind of needs with some kind of logical consistency. But even people who is opposed to us, even statists, socialists, and Keynesians, they still need, when they have to do to take personal decision, they still need financial privacy. I mean, even the KYC general at the top position, he will want financial privacy for his own transactions. Even
yeah.
NSA guys, they will want privacy for the NSA Black Ops, and even the most convinced Keynesian, he will want to save his wealth and his family's wealth from inflation. So
Hmm.
there is a point about consistent elaboration, which is a niche. A very few people are libertarian or anarcho-capitalist, agorist, cypherpunk, but everybody is a little bit libertarian when it comes to their own money. So I don't think
Hmm.
this first failure scenario to succeed. That the fact that people just don't care. The second failure scenario, which is still very, very unlikely, is that in order to compete with Bitcoin, the governments and regulators, they stop the kind of regulation that prevented something like Bitcoin from burning in the first place. So you
Hmm.
can remember, for example, eGold. So eGold was these two guys, a lawyer and an oncologist in the US. They created a system online in order to pay online, to store your wealth, and to pay without any kind of KYC identification. Everything was just based on nicknames, so without of any kind of personal identity, and without monetary manipulation, because the underpinning was gold and not a central bank liability. So something like Bitcoin already existed, but it was explicitly attacked and shut down by the regulator. So there is this hypothesis that the regulator will just stop trying to prevent some money and dark money. If this happen, Bitcoin is screwed in a certain way, because Bitcoin exists the way it exists because it has to be government resistant. If
Uh-huh.
government
Yeah.
from achieving some money and dark money, then a lot of other less censorship resistant option come back to make sense. In a way, if you think about that, BitTorrent is needed because the government wants to shut down Napster. But if the government doesn't try to shut down centralized service anymore, then BitTorrent is still there, but it's a niche, because now you can go back to Spotify and YouTube, and you can basically have free content. I mean, intellectual property laws are unenforceable,
Hmm.
and so governments stop to try to enforce, and so
Yeah.
you don't need the decentralized protocol anymore, because now you can watch movies on a centralized illegal website, but nobody cares because it's impossible to enforce anyway. This second scenario, I think, it's kind of likely as well, because basically the modern nation state is built on his possibility to inflate money with central banking. If you take that away, then the budget of most nation states just collapse. So
Hmm.
it's not like intellectual property or property or content right management that the regulator can just say, okay, you know what, we just give up monetary policy at all. You cannot do that, because the nation states as a concept is likely to collapse if they give away monetary policy. And they cannot give away monetary censorship as well, because if you don't censor cash, for example, then you cannot play with negative interest rates, because if people use as cash, you cannot really continue this kind of games with monetary policy. So I don't see the second scenario. Third scenario is that of failure is that basically the information-based consensus over one single history, one single set of rules, so the Bitcoin consensus, is
Hmm.
not game theoretically strong enough to survive, and so we see basically the need for this feature just diluting indefinitely into altcoins, forks, failures, different implementation that are not interoperable. So instead of creating a strong network effect, it's just like the internet, we create just a dispersion of little irrelevant little things.
Well, we
This will
have that
be
now,
uh,
right?
Oh, I don't agree that we have. It looks like we do, because if you look at metrics like trivially computed market caps, in which you just multiply the nominal supply with the price on some exchange, then you get the Bitcoin dominance being less than half. But I don't think that's a realistic picture. I think that's more like a representation of this cultural phenomenon of multiplication of hypes. But
Hmm.
actually, I think that if you look at the real cases, so people storing wealth under hyperinflation, they use Bitcoin, they don't use
Yeah.
shitcoin. People buying things in the dark market, in the dark web, there is a tiny fraction of Monero, and that's all. Everything else is still Bitcoin. Even if we say Bitcoin is not privacy coin, fungibility, but still, real people buy real forbidden things in Bitcoin. Real
Yeah.
donation flow to WikiLeaks is Bitcoin. It's not shitcoins.
Mhm.
Real, I mean, if you look at the real markets of saving and transferring wealth, that's basically Bitcoin. It looks like, I think it's like an optical delusion, just like if you look at the venture capital valuation of .com companies in
Yeah.
99, you think probably that there is like this Scambrium explosion of companies. But if you really look at the volume of people buying stuff online, you see that even back then there is basically Amazon and few others actually
Mm.
working. And pet.com, even if the evaluation is crazy, doesn't really move anything. So
Okay.
this scenario looks very likely now, but it doesn't really scare me in the long run. Also because, incentives look like short-term incentives are such that everybody is incentivized to create their own shitcoin. But
Uh-huh.
long-term incentives are the other way, because that if everybody can create a shitcoin that gets adopted by the market, then it means that nobody can really create a sustainable uninflatable money. So it's a lose-lose scenario. If everybody succeed in creating shitcoins, nobody succeeds, because everybody is printing money. There is not a monetary standard. There is
Yeah.
not a cap. There is not a predictable inflation, because inflation becomes infinite. So
Yeah, so there's no scarcity and there's an oversaturation, and that prevents the scarcity that Bitcoin, drives its value. It shoots
Precisely.
it down.
Bitcoin is scarce, is digital scarcity, but cryptocurrency are not scarce. Cryptocurrency
Mhm.
are infinitely inflatable. So they can, Bitcoin can lose to this scenario, but altcoins cannot win to this scenario. Nobody can win in this scenario. It's a lose-lose scenario. So for this reason, I think that long term, the incentive to shitcoinery are they basically become very, very low over long time frames, while they are very, very high over short time frames. So these are the three, and which is even more unlikely, and the last one, which is
Mhm.
violent crackdown by the government. So you
Mhm.
have like China
Yeah.
destroying all the ASICs in China with sophisticated operation of enforcement, and then you get difficulty basically too high and hash power down to 10%, and Bitcoin basically enters some kind of user experience spiral in which blocks are so slow. We cannot organize for a proof of work fork, because in theory it's possible, but practically
Mhm.
organization is difficult. And so you can have something like that. But if you think about these scenarios, they are all possible. None of these scenarios is impossible, but they are all extremely unlikely. So the
Yeah.
overall success of Bitcoin is it's enough likely that I'm not really scared in betting everything I have and I am on that.
Yeah, let's hit that last one because that's something that I think there's a lot of FUD over, but it just isn't practical, right? China is perceived as this world superpower in hash, but I think that's a bit of a misconception. And my understanding is it's mining pool owners that are a big part of the concentration of hash, as well as, of course, mining facilities. But the majority that makes China look so big in terms of hash is that if I was running, a little nice hash miner or whatever it is on my PC, and the mining pool operator is in China, that would basically mean that my hash is added to a Chinese pool, but I can withdraw my hash at any point and allocate it to a different hash pool. Let's say that. So yeah, that possibility is a little weird to me because China doesn't actually own as much hash as people believe. Do you want to go into that?
Yeah, so I agree that there is a level of hash rate which is, let's say, coordinated by Chinese pools, and hash rate which is physically easy to detect into big Chinese facilities. So
Hmm.
the economies of scales of mining are such that some amount of physical machines are actually in big mining operation, but it's not as much as you would think. I would think that physically, I don't know, I'm just making up numbers, but I think it's rational to think that something about 70% or 60% of Asian power right now is physically in China. So
Hmm.
that's a lot, but
Yeah.
of these, only a minority is easily identifiable in very big and very easy to target mining facilities. Some of these mining operation will be maybe they are stealth, and they maybe are connected with some kind of hydroelectric power, using some bribe to the local
Hmm.
bureaucrats. So you bribe him and he gives you energy from China. One of the reasons China is what it is about Asian power is that they built this incredible using socialist central planning. They built
Hmm.
an unused surplus of hydroelectric production. So Bitcoin being a natural force for efficiency, being a natural catalyzer for efficiency, basically moved a lot of demand for energy where there is a surplus offer of energy, using corruption mostly as a method in which you can connect with hydroelectric power. So probably China cannot easily target this kind of facility, but even more, if you, I mean, the reason people create big facilities is that it's more convenient. But if the government starts to target you, then it's more convenient to run a small hidden
Yeah.
stealth facility compared to centralized. So it's like a double negative feedback loop. So the more the government let you go, the more you will centralize, the more it will be
Hmm.
easy to hit you. But the more the government tries to hit you, the more the government will help decentralizing the network.
Yeah.
I would say that probably also there is a public choice dynamics involved. So we government as a big single monolithic entity, but it's not. It's made of people, and people are easily corrupt or self-interested. So imagine that you have soldiers sent from China government everywhere to size ASICs. So how many of these soldiers will really destroy the ASICs, and how many of these soldiers may be allied with some bureaucrats will just move these ASICs to some of their facility, starting to run them for money in secret. So not even in North Korea you can avoid corruption and divergence of interest at the center of the government. Neither in Nazi Germany, even if you have the most
Hmm.
scary totalitarian government is never a single interest unit. It's always
Uh-huh.
made by people, and it is if I am a China general and I can just take I don't know 10% of the miner and run them in my facility, I will do that, helping Bitcoin. So Bitcoin is strong because it relies on this kind of forces. Of course, there is a problem. While mining itself is kind of easy to redecentralize if needed, and also there are some kind of thermodynamical reason to decentralize it. For example, cooling down two facilities is easier than cooling down one big facility. So mining as economies of scale, but also diseconomies of scale, which are very good. The problem is more about ASICs production. So if the government basically forces, for example, Bitmain at certain point, Bitmain had basically 80% market share of mining equipment overall. So if you effectively force Bitmain to put some kind of kill switch that basically was there in the Bitmain S9, there was a remote kill switch, and you managed to replace the market of the miners with one key switch, and then you press the key switch. In that case, probably you can be pretty effective to shut down miners everywhere. Of course, that doesn't kill Bitcoin. It just creates like an ice age. I would argue that this ice age will just be somehow overcame. I mean,
Yeah.
it's an anti-fragility. You hurt Bitcoin very bad once. That means that you cannot hurt it anymore in the same way twice.
Yeah.
Bitcoin will
Absolutely.
hurt, it will survive, it will heal, and then it's even worse because you don't have that silver bullet anymore. It's just a one-shot gun to try
Yeah.
to do that.
I
You have to
agree.
be
A
sure
lot
to
of
put it.
the Yeah, a lot of the end game scenarios, like a lot of the nukes for Bitcoin are they're one bullet guns. If once they're done, there are ways to prevent that from happening. Like I call one of the, say there is a crackdown, right? And I have a few computers in my house, and people across crypto Twitter are saying, you guys, China just sent some black ops, into all these mining facilities. Everyone turn on this hashing, download this thing, and next thing you know, you have everyone with their laptop, their PC, across the world doing all this stuff, and hash equilibrium, like, reaches some sort of equilibrium. I think there's a lot of interesting scenarios, and obviously you don't want to bet on something like this, like an altruistic scenario to be the play out. But Bitcoin is an attack to the most powerful entities that have ever existed on the planet. So it's naive to think that there won't be some sort of attempt on Bitcoin's life. Now, I am getting some questions here. Let me just run through these quickly. XRP, we're going to hit XRP stuff in a little bit. Let's transition to XRP. I would like to hit with you, Giacomo. Before we move to XRP, I really want pretend I'm a no coiner, and I want you to convince me why I should love Bitcoin above them all. But obviously, we hit some end game scenarios. That's a little more for people that have a background. I'm running through a couple more questions. People are trashing scarcity. Well, guys, scarcity is it's a supply and demand, right? If the supply is low, that doesn't necessarily mean that demand is high. If demand is high for something that is globally, digitally, anonymous, peer-to-peer, uncensorable, unconfiscatable transacting power, that's something that has demand. So if you're looking at something, look at the price. Price is going to, particularly in this area, you're going to see price is a nice representation of supply and demand. And obviously, price can be manipulated for numerous reasons, but scarcity, just because something is scarce, doesn't mean that it has demand. Um,
Yeah,
XRP proof of work. All right, so let's hit proof. Let's hit on proof of work a little bit, and there's a little bit of jokes here, and the Lightning Network. That's pretty much two of the big things that I think everyone could benefit from. As far as proof of work is one of the big FUDs. Lightning Network is one of the big FUDs, because right now, in my opinion, Bitcoin delivers. Right, it is an excellent store of value. It is censorship resistant. It is anonymous. Your identity, Joe Saz, is not tied to my Bitcoin transaction. It is a code. So just because it's on a public blockchain, that does not mean that my identity is compromised through the use of Bitcoin.
absolutely. That's another big FUD. Bitcoin Satoshis are pretty much fungible at the transactional level. Yes, if we use on-chain layer one of Bitcoin, which is not what we will use long term for everything, because we will often use layer two, and layer two is pretty much anonymous, meaning that only the two parties involved in the direct transaction know about each other. So there is anonymous routing over Onion protocol. So there is a very good fungibility on layer two. But even just in layer one, the Satoshi as themselves, they are basically fungible at the transaction level. The problems that we see about fungibility and privacy are mostly a problem of bad practices of users and wallet. Basically, every transaction we do should be a coin join. We should use techniques like Wasabi Chaumian
Uh-huh.
coin join, or like join market liquidity providing. If every wallet implemented that, or if every time you don't use a coin join, the transaction you create looks like a coin join, then you cannot basically anymore infer anything from a Bitcoin transaction. So I think there are two elements to privacy. The first is moving gradually to second layers and layers on top, which are more private because they don't use a global consensus. And the second trend will be to actually use the layer one in a way that maximizes the fungibility function that are already there in Bitcoin and are already pretty effective if you use them. You cannot really trace Wasabi transaction effectively. Of course, you can try to blacklist Wasabi transaction, but that will be basically equivalent to ban and blacklist Bitcoin at all, because eventually all our transaction will become tainted. That's the
Uh-huh.
goal, and that's the mission, and that's the obvious game theoretical outcome. Because if you create two Bitcoin, one Bitcoin is whitelisted and you need the permission of the government to use it, or to store it for against inflation. And one Bitcoin is black market. The first Bitcoin will become gradually useless because then again, if you wanted a coin that was controlled by the government, whitelisted, inflated, and taxed, then you would just use PayPal or Venmo
Hmm.
or Cash App with
Yeah.
the US dollar. So only the black market Bitcoin becomes something that does the function of Bitcoin again. And so if you try to separate Bitcoin from whitelisted and blacklisted, blacklisted becomes Bitcoin, and whitelisted becomes just a useless techno bubble without any kind of feature. So you cannot effectively whitelist Bitcoin or blacklist Bitcoin. So
Yeah.
privacy looks bad, but is way better than, for example, with privacy coin. I'm still, I mean, not very convinced about Monero, but I think that Monero could have short-term utility in some kind of dark market. But for example, things like Zcash, they have zero privacy advantages because the privacy is opt-in. So everybody is using non-private, non-shielded transactions, and so the anonymity set of people actually using shielded transaction is basically zero or way smaller than the anonymity set of Bitcoin itself. So
Yeah.
the
Let me
problem
ask you
is
this,
not
bro.
sure.
Do you believe in a future where multiple coins can exist, or do you believe in a Bitcoin dominant future?
I do believe in a Bitcoin dominant future. As I said before, I think that the alternative could be no Bitcoin at all. So the alternative could be failure because of dilution over several projects. This is an unlikely but possible scenario. While the scenario of coexistence of an indefinite number of cryptocurrencies, for me, an economical impossibility. You cannot have an economy where there is an uncapped, unknown, unpredictable a number of different assets, all used indifferently as money. Of course, what I think is that we will have, I think that the most likely scenario of the future will be a power law distribution scenario in which you have something very, very big and something that is smaller and smaller and smaller. But I think that this smaller and smaller thing will not be altcoins. They will probably be, I mean, a likely scenario, I know it sounds crazy, but will be Bitcoin, then in power law distribution, something radically different from Bitcoin. So maybe fiat residuals of fiat money, relics of fiat money, then something still different like gold,
Uh-huh.
then something which is maybe a different kind of asset with different kind of correlation. So in order to have a diversification, so maybe physical commodities, shares of company, maybe they
Hmm.
could be represented digitally, but they will not be other kind of synthetic scarcity clones of Bitcoin.
Hmm.
The lower part of this market cap, this equilibrium market cap, in my view, will be collectibles. And in that case, yes, you can have an indefinite number of collectibles, for example, for historical reason. Nothing really goes to zero ever. If something has an historical saliency, it will never go to actual zero as a trade value. If you have a paper certificate of pet.com or Terranos or a scam company that failed badly, you still can probably sell this certificate on eBay for a price because it has an historical value. So I think that shitcoins will not go to actual zero, but they will reduce their relevance on the market to a relevance of collectibles, in which basically the marginal value of a collectible is zero when you move away from the important historical ones and you move to the less interesting ones. In this regard, if I had to bet long term about altcoins, I will bet for very, very, very small market cap. I don't know what is the market cap. What the market cap of postal stamps? Uh,
Oh, no
I
idea.
guess yeah, let's maybe we can check this number out. That could be a reasonable market cap for altcoins, and probably the greatest share of this market cap will be for the oldest altcoins like Litecoin and Namecoin, but not because
Mhm.
they are better as a technology or as use case, just because they are older and so they are historically more relevant than the opposite. So they're not going to zero, but they are not going to be used as money, because for many reasons, money is what everybody else accept as money. So if you have to store wealth or you have to transfer wealth, you don't want to use the many protocols. Otherwise, you have the problem of double consciousness of wants. Basically, it's a multi-coin scenario in which you enter a restaurant and you look at the menu, and on the menu you have 20 kinds of food and 20 kinds of money to pay your food with. That's called barter.
Hmm.
Arguably we already had that in the prehistory, maybe not, but it's highly inefficient. And the reason that money was invented was to go over barter. A multi-coin scenario is a barter scenario,
Okay.
and the efficiencies of market that goes away from barter and to money, and Bitcoin is the only possible candidate for money in this
All right.
sense.
Yeah, I think personally that Bitcoin is the best application of money, and that's what makes Bitcoin. Well, obviously this rabbit hole goes deep, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. I know that we have so much to hit. So in the last few minutes, not few minutes, like in maybe 10 to 15 or so, let's try to hit Lightning Network. Let's just smash that one as hard as you can. Let's a Lightning Network, for anyone that doesn't know, it's a layer 2 solution. It is an off-chain resolution of paying Bitcoin for goods and services. You create a channel, and there are some elephants in the room. I believe one of which is IP address. You have to tie your IP address to your pub key, right?
Not
But
really.
there, okay, so
That's
there
the
are
most obvious.
workarounds.
Yeah, absolutely. My node, for example, my wife's node, my node are over Tor, over Onion. So
Okay,
you tie your node with your Onion identity, but not with
so
the regular.
you're anonymously transacting with Lightning currently.
Yeah.
And why do people say Lightning is centralized?
Mostly they either lie or they just are
It's
clueless.
just no,
Lightning
there's
is
no, yeah.
No, there's Lightning cannot centralize Bitcoin. Lightning itself could become kind of centralized in worst case scenario, but that will be anyway an improvement over second layer scalability. What I mean that Bitcoin is Bitcoin blockchain is layer one. This layer one has a problem. The problem is that it is based on global consensus. Global consensus means that every single node must to record, validate, and eventually store every single change in the state of the system forever. That means that people syncing up a Bitcoin node in 2040, they will have to validate, to download and validate my coffee purchase in 2011. So of course this is very simple as a system, very flat, so it's simple to understand, but is very bad for scalability and very bad for privacy, because if everybody has to record forever every transaction of everybody, that's clearly bad for scalability and bad for privacy. So we
Mhm.
need some kind of second layers, but this is not new. Like Alfini was commenting this, responding to Satoshi Nakamoto back in 2010. It was like, okay, this is great for a base layer of settlement, but for every day transaction, we cannot use global consensus. Either for privacy or for scalability, we will have some banks, commercial banks, basically keeping the real Bitcoin and representing that with with centralized digital IOUs, and people will just move around everyday IOUs, but the underlying Bitcoin will be used as hard collateral for global settlement. Of course, Lightning Network is an improvement among that, because we don't really have a choice to have every single node validating every purchase. The choice we have is Bitcoin as a settlement layer and trusted centralized entities on top, like Sapo, Coinbase, ChangeTip. So using trusted entities in order to scale Bitcoin. But that
Uh-huh.
is very bad for centralization, because trust doesn't scale very well. So you cannot have 2 millions of trusted entities. You end up with a few trusted entities because of how trust works. While Lightning Network can decentralize the second layer in a trustless way, kind of trustless way, trust minimized way, across a large number of players. So if Lightning fails and gets very centralized, it still helps decentralizing Bitcoin more. If it succeeds and it becomes very decentralized, it decentralizes Bitcoin even more. But it's a win-win. You cannot really lose decentralization with Lightning. You can only worst case scenario, you don't lose anything. Best case scenario, you gain a lot of decentralization.
Mhm.
That's the bottom, basically. Of
So
course, Lightning is not perfect. For example, Satoshi Nakamoto already in 2011 was thinking about payment channels. So his idea was when you have to transact many times with the same party, don't put everything on the blockchain, because that's bad. Just create a transaction without confirming it on the blockchain. You exchange a transaction, signing a new transaction every time, and there will be a rule in order to make sure that only the last one can be broadcasted. This was an idea by Satoshi. The problem with this idea was implementation, of course, because the first implementation with Satoshi, that Satoshi didn't work. It was a n sequence implementation, and it didn't work. But the other problem is that we cannot be expected to open one channel with every party we will interact with forever. So the real idea behind Lightning was routing. So we can just route from this channel to the other. So it's a little bit like the internet itself. If we have to expect to open a TCP connection with every single node on the network, that's basically that's physically impossible. What you do is using IP nodes for routing the content, the packets of your TCP connection. So now I'm talking with you. The packet of information of our live stream, they are not going through cable from my computer to your computer. They are routed by other IP addresses, and that's just like that's how Lightning works, which is a
So let
pretty
me
neat
let me throw a
idea.
question at you. I don't know if you remember the name Matt Hamilton. He's the one that I interviewed about XRP. He was the XRP technical specialist, brilliant individual, and he just popped into the comments here and he said something. And it looks like he might stick around for a bit for the as we transition to the XRP discussion.
Sure.
So I'm going to throw some things that Matt Hamilton says our way. He says Lightning Network is centralized because there is no practical way to use it unless you create channels to central bank nodes. Can you comment on that, or do you need me
Yeah,
to
that's
repeat?
not true. I no, thank you. I get it. So I use a Lightning Network pretty much for mostly for experimental reason, because as we told before, Bitcoin for a while will mostly be used for saving than for spending. But when I have to spend Bitcoin, and I do have to spend Bitcoin, I use the Lightning Network a lot, and I don't pass through any kind of central entity. I have a direct channel, so you can use Lightning Network in two ways. The first is creating a direct channel. Of course, this is expensive because at least once you have to create an on-chain transaction in order to anchor the channel. This is the first way you can use it, and you don't need any kind of intermediary.
Mhm.
The second one is using routing. But using routing means that you just need to find the less resistant path between you and the counterparty. You don't need a big liquidity hub. You will need a big liquidity hub for important for very
Mhm.
large amount, because if you want large amount, then you need capacity, you need liquidity. So maybe you cannot open three very liquid channels, so you only open one, and there is the emergency of a very centralized liquidity provider. But there are there are a lot of caveats to this. The first caveat, which is a little bit in the future if you want, is AMP, atomic multi-path transaction. So right now, the first beta version of Lightning, for sake of simplicity, works in this way. You create a path from you to the receiver, and you spend there. But this is not the way it must go. For example, AMP is you create several patterns, you split your liquidity over several patterns, you send them atomically at the same time, like a real Lightning. So the original idea of Lightning was
Mhm.
basically a chain of payment, atomically splitting and reuniting, and you can use several paths and bypass hubs. There are several forces that that can centralize systems, and several forces that can decentralize systems. In this case, basically, there is one reason you don't want to be an hub, which is security. Being a Lightning Network node means that you have to keep some Bitcoin in hot wallet, which are not secured by the validation model of Bitcoin, but but they are secure by a punishment model, which is okay. It's good enough to work, but is not as secure as the Bitcoin layer one. So layer two is less secure. You have to keep your keys hot on a hot wallet in order to route, because you have to sign transaction all the time, and you have to rely on a punishment model which is less secure than a validation model. So if you are a bank, a big bank, and you have Bitcoin, storing your Bitcoin inside Lightning channel in order to route a lot of liquidity will be less secure for you. So of course you will do that, but you will do that up to a point, and you will ask for fees, and these fees will be competitive with other nodes.
Mhm.
But even that, assume that our friend is right, and we end up with a very big node concentrating most of the liquidity. Still, that's the second layer. So the alternative we had before Lightning for second layer was very few super centralized custodial solutions, completely trust based and KYC AML forced. So you move from Coinbase and Xapo and change tip to, let's say, 10, 20 big Lightning Network nodes over Onion, trustless, so you don't have to know about their identity. They cannot
Mhm.
do an exit scam because that they would have to collude with miners to scam. So basically, you have this kind of this. So the worst scenario with Lightning Network is better than the best scenario without Lightning Network. It's more decentralized.
Mhm. Okay, so excellent. Now let's see. I think Matt, one of your questions was answered in that past one about liquidity. Now let's see. Users are not going to want to lock their funds up in channels. If I lock some Bitcoin up in a channel to spend with a coffee shop over here, then I can't use that Bitcoin to transact with a sandwich shop over here, unless A and B
Yeah.
happen to have
Yes.
channels between them. But why would they want to lock their own funds up to each other?
So that's exactly the importance of routing. The original concept of payment channel of Satoshi was had this problem, and Lightning solves this problem with routing. So when you put some Bitcoin in Lightning channel, you don't really lock this coin. This coin will be locked if nobody was connected to the Lightning network. But if kind of everybody, or a large amount of nodes are connected to the Lightning network, then your funds are not locked at all. You can spend your fund directly to the counterparty that you have a channel with. You can spend this fund directly with a kind of zero fee, with very low fee and a very fast confirmation time, with others connected through other nodes, but they're not locked. And if you want to move them on chain, you still can. So if you, for example, I have a channel with you, I want to pay. So you are my coffee shop.
Uh-huh.
There is a bakery shop. The bakery shop is not connected to you. So what I do, if I have a path between me, you, and the bakery shop, I use the path. If I don't have it, I must do a transaction on chain to pay the bakery shop. Instead of making a transaction on chain, I directly make a transaction on chain, which opens a new channel with the bakery shop or with somebody connected to the bakery shop. And in this way, for the next time, I will have, with the spend with the cost of just one transaction, a connection with the bakery shop. But the funds in my channel with the coffee shop are not locked. They
Mhm.
are, if they are more liquid than the fund locked on chain. So you have to switch this mindset. The funds that are on chain without the channel, they are kind of locked, because to move them is pretty expensive and it's pretty slow. The funds on the Lightning Network, they are actually less locked than the others. The problem is that they are less secure. So I don't want to promote Lightning Network like it's a free lunch. Nothing is a free lunch.
Uh-huh.
So you don't get anything for anything. Lightning Network Bitcoins are less secure, but they are cheaper and faster to move. So they are more liquid but less secure. Right now, for example, if you have an hardware failure with your computer and you want to recover your on-chain bitcoins, you just need your recovery key, your seed. Basically, it's not completely true, but let's assume you just need your seed. With
Mhm.
Lightning, it's a hell. You need to store every single channel update. You have to store it securely because it's a cryptographic toxic waste that can be used against you. So it's very difficult to back up the information to recover Lightning channels. So there is people is looking for a catch. Like Lightning Network is too good to be true. There must be a catch. Yes, there is, but it's not that you are locking funds. You are unlocking funds, making them easier to spend, but you are putting them from the security of a safe to the unsecurity of a pocket wallet. So let's see your Lightning channels as your wallet, and your on-chain final transaction or confirmed transaction as your safe in the wall. The latter is slower and more expensive to use for liquidity, but it's safer. That's
Mhm.
the basically the trade-off you have to imagine about Lightning.
So I'm just going to say something real quick to digest because Matt Hamilton is kind of bringing up, I think, a good transitional point here. But so, long story short, Lightning Network is a spider web. If there is a route between you and both the coffee shop, and that's through any means, it could go, it doesn't have to go in a straight line from you to A to B. It can go from you to 30 different routes and then reach the coffee shop, as well as 30 different routes and reach the bakery. There is, in
even
theory,
even
a
in
way.
parallel. So not just in sequence, but even in parallel with the EMP. So yes.
Uh-huh. So there's a combination now, and if you don't have direct routing of capabilities between A and B, one would have to open channels with both A and B. So
Yeah.
that is the downside. So if I went to buy my coffee, and it would take me a couple minutes to open up that channel, and then I would have to pay on Lightning. I'd have to pay an on-chain fee to fund my Lightning wallet, and then pay in Lightning, and then I'd
Yeah,
have
I would
to
say much more than a couple of minutes, because you need
more.
a significant amount of confirmation, or which are 10 minutes apart in average. So I would say that opening a new channel with some kind of security can take up to an hour, depending on the fees you want to spend. So
Okay.
yeah,
So
it's
you
a
don't.
yeah.
Yeah, it would be tough. You wouldn't want to wait an hour for your coffee. You wouldn't want to wait an hour for your sandwich. Obviously, that's something that isn't ideal, but it's something that is a one-time thing. There are positives and negatives. Now, Matt, let's hit this. He said, "Why would I want to sacrifice security for speed with Lightning Network?" And we're going to start the transition into this XRP thing, the XRP point and counterpoints. Um, so yeah, Matt, I hope you stick around. We're going to start hitting some of this stuff. Matt says, "Why would I want to sacrifice security for speed with Lightning Network when I could have both and use XRP and have nothing to worry about with the uncertainty of routing?"
So that's correct for every kind of trade-off. If the trade-off is fake, so if you have an alternative that can get you that can have you eating the cake and have it too, then sure, you should go with the solution that can magically do everything without trade-offs. My answer to that is that it's not really possible to have the feature that you want from Bitcoin without the trade-offs on Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Trade-offs in Bitcoin don't exist because Satoshi was lazy or evil or stupid, or developers after him were evil or lazy or stupid. Trade-offs exist because they do exist. So for the same, it's like I can turn this question around like this: why would you choose between the security of your safe and the velocity of your wallet if you could have a magic safe in your pocket that you can bring around but is still secure as the other? My answer would be because I dispute the claim that this safe yeah, does exist in the first place, and I would really like to believe that it does exist, but I'm skeptical of its existence, and I think it's not been proven. And there are several clues to imagine the reason they are not actually working. In particular, XRP is a huge chapter that we will probably systematically open right now. But
Yeah.
my too long to read claim is that in XRP you don't get the feature of Bitcoin. You get other feature that are, in my opinion, inferior to the feature that you had with centralized systems before the regulation, like the first X.com before PayPal, or Liberty Reserve, or eGold. I think the feature in those centralized systems were better than the feature in XRP. And the reason you cannot use those systems anymore is that eventually centralized system that can be shut down, they eventually get shut down if they provide features that are unwanted by the regulator. I think that
Hmm.
Ripple is in the phase in which is not yet shut down, but it will be. And I don't see any realistic scenario in which it will not be, except maybe one. We discussed it before about the BitTorrent effect. So you have a centralized file sharing system. The government shut that down. So you create eventually BitTorrent standard. So 30% of the internet traffic at some point is BitTorrent. Everybody's using BitTorrent. But now, since so many people using BitTorrent anyway, the government stops to shut down centralized system. And so now, if you speak with a kid, with a 15 years old kid about movies online, it doesn't use BitTorrent or Popcorn Time. It does use centralized system because nobody's shutting them down anymore. So Ripple could survive because the alternative of Bitcoin. So the government shut down eGold because there is no alternative. So it's effective to shut it down. But the
Hmm.
government doesn't shut down Ripple because if you do, there is the Bitcoin alternative. And so Bitcoin becomes basically like an umbrella that allows centralized altcoins to survive.
So
This
let's
is a
hit, you
possibility,
keep
but
saying centralized. Why is XRP centralized? That's going to be, I think, a very hot topic.
yes, sure. So basically, in science, you basically have this impossibility result, which is called FLP, from the name of Fisher, Lynch, and Peterson. Basically, FLP says that you cannot have safety, liveness, and fault tolerance at the same time. It's a very complicated way of saying that you cannot have everything. You have to sacrifice something, especially if you are in an open network. So in an open network, basically what you have sacrifice in the case of Bitcoin is the so let's go with order. First idea, for example, if you go back reading the reusable proof of work project by Alfini before Bitcoin, one of the ancestors of Bitcoin. So Alfini was saying, in order to avoid double spending, we use one server, one centralized server. This server will basically avoid double spending, but in order to keep it honest, we will do basically remote hardware remote attestation. So this didn't work, and so people started to move from a Chown server to the idea of a branch server, which is a federation of fixed nodes. So you have a list of nodes that can validate, and only those nodes can validate in a closed system. So this is, for example, how Liquid sidechain works. It's not a bad design. The fixed federation design is good. The problem is that it is very difficult to update. If you shut down a certain number of nodes, then you need a way to update to a new list of nodes. But even either you have a centralized coordinator that can tell everybody which are the new authorized nodes. Otherwise, you end up in an open list without a specific whitelisting. And in that case, there is mathematical guarantee that consensus cannot be reached by an open system with liveness and the possibility of joining and exiting by new nodes. So Ripple is basically proposing a federation model in which one entity, which has the saliency, the importance, because it's basically the company that created everything, which is also managing everything, and also owning basically, I don't know, 80% of something like that of the total supply. This centralized company, they basically create a list of nodes, the UNL. The nodes, is not necessary that the nodes are controlled directly by the company. The necessity is that the company creates a static authorized list of nodes. Otherwise, if you don't do that, then you have a divergence in the system in which any single node can have a not overlapping list. And then when you have an overlap that goes below a certain threshold, you have a divergence of consensus. So you take away the safety part of the triangle. So long story short, Ripple is basically a federation model, just like Liquid, but is not promoted, in my opinion, honestly, as a federation. It is I will use a very strong word. It is fraudulently promoted as a fully decentralized system in the Bitcoin sense, because of mostly marketing reasons. But actually, if you take down the nodes in the UNL list, and if you prevent the Ripple company from establish the trust on a new definite UNL, then you can practically shut down Ripple pretty easily. So my point is, if tomorrow you close the Ripple company, Ripple can still go on, but probably the XRP asset will basically collapse, but the network could still go
Okay.
on without overspending until you also take down the majority of the nodes in the UNL, and then you don't have a new coordinator to replace the UNL with the new UNL. Proof of work is an alternative because it's a way to create live, so real time, a new consensus over a new set of validators using proof of work. It's not perfect. Nothing is perfect. Nothing is free. There are a lot of shortcoming from proof of work. It's low. It can be centralized with ASIC production, as we said. So I'm not claiming that proof of work is perfect. What I'm claiming is that it's the only working solution that everybody found so far to have what is called a dynamic membership multi-party consensus, which means a consensus over an history where there are several parties that can agree, and the set of these parties is not static but is dynamic, so it can change over time without a single coordinator. But if you think about that, that's the story of every altcoin. There was this idea about, just to go outside of Ripple for 1 second, there was this idea of using divergent graphs instead of a single chain for Bitcoin 2013, and then things like IOTA and Nano, they implemented this idea. Of course, this idea cannot work in theory, but it works in practice because there is a centralized coordinator. And so they say, okay, right now we're centralized, but eventually we can just take out the centralized coordinator, and magically it will happen. No, it will not. The reason people in the 90s started to converge over proof of work was that the federation model cannot easily survive the censorship of the central party defining the set of the federation. So right now you have Ripple company. If you take away Ripple company and you wait for some nodes in the UNL to go down, you cannot recreate consensus again. And this is not really, and I mean, it's an opinion, but it's a very grounded in mathematical science opinion.
And we're talking about Ripple, the company, going down because of its legal issues as well as the potential for SEC intervention. So it is a theoretical probability. It's, are people putting too much weight on that? Probably no. Matt, if you come in, I'll bring it up. So far, Matt's brought up a couple things. He's just to make you aware. He said anyone can define their own UNL. Yes, there is an issue that you can diverge, but if you do, your node will simply halt and refuse to process transactions. Now, that's one thing he
Yeah.
said, as well as, so it is very easy to choose a set of validators for your UNL as you just look at the network and pick a top set of agreeing validators.
No,
So,
that's if that was possible, you will not need any kind of consensus mechanism at all. If it was possible to automatically coordinate a possible and distributed denial of attack resistant to select socially, like looking at the network, and select anonymous counterparty that are honest. If that was possible, we will not need the Ripple consensus in the first place, and we will not need the UNL, and we will not need the proof of work, and we will not need proof of stake theories. The reason we have proof of work and these other theories or federation is exactly that. It's impossible to live, so with liveness, you cannot really arrive to a coordination of a consensus systematically and reliably if you don't have a coordinator. I mean, why do we need this kind of mechanism that Matt is describing to arrive to a consensus of the list, if we can, if this mechanism exists, this social mechanism of looking around exists, why don't use it directly to deciding which transaction is final and which transaction is not final? So we have two scenarios. Either this mechanism does exist, so you can look at the network and decide the majority in a way which is Sybil attack resistant and which is DDoS resistant. If you can, you don't need a UNL. You can just use that property in order to select the transaction which is final and to avoid double spending. Or this doesn't work, so you need a UNL, but you need a UNL, and if you take down the UNL, you cannot reach consensus of a new UNL without a strong central party coordinating everybody.
Mhm. All right. I mean, I understand that. I know that, honestly, I have a feeling in the future, when you're free in a month or whatever, we might need to get you and Matt Hamilton live, and I might just need to say,
Exactly.
3 minutes for you, 3 minutes for you, because,
So I acknowledge that this debate is very asymmetrical, because I can talk a lot and Matt can
yeah,
only write very fast. So this is not fair from a debate point of view.
I,
So
I
let's
want,
consider this my specific view more than a debate, and
yeah.
eventually maybe we will make a debate.
Of course, yeah, because I gave Matt the floor, and Matt, you did a great job. I loved our conversation. I have a lot of respect for you, as well as a lot less hate for XRP. I understand its people. I do believe there's a lot of bad things going on. You know that I'm never going to be able to agree with the pre-mine. That's like the number one thing. That's the worst case scenario for a cryptocurrency in my mind. But let's say we'll do more of a debate style thing in the future. Two busy men, obviously, this will have to be coordinated, and it'll be in the future. But so let's give Giacomo the floor as we're doing, and we'll keep moving along with the XRP things. And Matt, as I see your questions, as they're still relevant, because I know that we're moving, I'll bring them up. But Matt most recently said consensus has nothing to do with deciding which transactions are final. All it does is order the transactions in order to solve the double spend problem.
Fine, I would say the same thing. Ordering the transaction in a way which is reliable is getting finality, if not theoretical finality. For example, in Bitcoin, with proof of work, you have canonical
Uh-huh.
ordering that eventually approaches some kind of practical finality, because you know that the cost to reorg will diverge to infinity. So eventually, that's finality. But I don't mean mathematical finality. You're right. It's consensus is a way to order valid transactions in a way that everybody can automatically agree upon. I
Mhm.
agree.
So, all right. So when I was talking Ripple, all right. Let's talk pre-mine. What are your thoughts on pre-mines? Where do you land? Are pre-mines good, bad? Are they justifiable in your opinion? Let's hit that real quick.
So I will first like to do a distinction. One thing is just wrong, like unjustifiable, like you are doing something bad, like a crime. And I don't think that premine are in that category. Premine are a legitimate choice of a company. If you want to
Hmm.
create a coin to premine, let's do that. There is nothing bad you are doing to other people. The reason that I contest, I go against premine is that I think that's the actual wrong choice for two reasons. Because first, you are basically creating the worst possible incentive mechanism, because you are so let's imagine Satoshi Nakamoto coming up with Bitcoin using proof of work for anti-double spending, but instead of using proof of work for coin generation as well, he basically creates 21 millions and he starts to sell or give away 21 millions himself. So this kind of system will basically just not work at scale and over the long term, because it's a kind of system which is, from the point of view of incentives, absolutely socially unscalable.
Hmm.
The reason that things like Ripple look like they are socially scaling, it's just because of the optical delusion I was talking before. You have Bitcoin. So my idea would be that a pre-mine launched before Bitcoin would have failed immediately because nobody will trust the central pre-miner.
Yeah.
The only reason that pre-mine can exist now is because they are cargo cult of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin arrives. Everybody's skeptics about Bitcoin. Nobody believes it. But then Bitcoin shows a success rate over 2-3 years. And now people got proven wrong about Bitcoin. So they are finally open to believe every kind of extraordinary claim. Even the same claim that they would not believe in 2009, now they believe them without any kind of extraordinary proof. So it's like a pendulum, you go from no coiners, so Bitcoin is impossible, then Bitcoin proves to you to be possible, and now you, instead of be balanced, you go to full gullibility, and you just basically you are open to believe everything, because if Bitcoin is possible, everything is possible. And if people made money on Bitcoin, we will make money on every kind of pre-mined shitcoin. So
Uh-huh.
pre-mined is not a crime. Pre-mining is a game theoretically broken incentive system, and it cannot work in the long run. And if you pre-mine, you are basically, I think it's morally, it's not, it's a little bit ethically questionable, because you're creating a system that cannot work at scale because of social incentive reasons, and you're promoting that to the first buyers as if could scale in long term and over large numbers. It cannot. And you also directly diluting the Bitcoin digital scarcity, which is something which is not a crime. I mean, it's open source, no violence, no enforcement. So take this code and do whatever you want, create a shitcoin, create a fork, do whatever you want. But I think it's morally questionable to take a project. So let's say that there is a Linus Torvald making a big effort over the creation of the kernel Linux. So now you take the kernel Linux, which is open source, you change it, and you try to push very hard your own in a non-interoperable way. So you create another Linux kernel which is not interoperable with the previous. So basically, you break down the network effects of the Linux or the basically the Linux stack. So that's nothing. That's not a violence. It's not a crime, but it's something a little bit unethical from the point of view of the free open source software ethics and etiquette, because you are leveraging the work of other people to recreate the same experiment in a way which is breaking down the network effect. So what would be a way to create a new let's assume you have a new kind of technological infrastructure you want to experiment with. For example, you want to experiment with the Ripple consensus, or with proof of stake, or with whatever you want. So I think that the first more ethical way to do that would be to create the system as a side chain of Bitcoin. So you create basically a Ripple model that's where you don't create your own new coin, but you have Bitcoin interoperably in and out, which with the federation is actually possible, just like Liquid. You just need a multi-sig of the people in the UNL. They have a Shamir share secret for a key that can get Bitcoin out. So a federation sidechain is probably the best way to go to experiment. If you cannot do that, my second favorite, my second best will be a proof of born. So you create a coin, but the coin exists only if people can prove that they destroyed the Bitcoin. So at least you can basically guarantee that your new altcoin will never go above the Bitcoin price, and you basically have a one-way side chain. But for the other way around, you need a atomic swap, which is better than the alternative. The third favorite thing would be a UTXO fork, just like Bcash or Big Gold or whatever. So you take the snapshot of the UTXO at a certain point, and you give your new coin to the owners proportionally. Of course, my contention with Bcash is not that they did this. My contention is that they did this and they promoted the resulting coin as Bitcoin. That was the fraud. But the idea of doing a UTXO fork is, in my opinion, a very good idea. So the fourth best way would be to create a new altcoin with fair mining from scratch. So let's do again what Satoshi did. It's a bad solution because you are inflating the total supply of cryptocurrencies, but at least it's competitive, it's open in theory. And the absolute worst scenario, in my opinion, is the pre-mine, in which basically you create something that really cannot scale socially. And if it looks like it's just because the market is still confused, and I think this is not an equilibrium situation in which the market will be able to remain long term. People, I mean, people is evaluating the XRP token, which is basically defined by one single entity that has an unbelievable amount of the market cap, is
Yeah,
of the total supply.
it's about 60 billion out of 100 billion, so 60% plus whatever is in the founders' pockets, which was 20% awarded to the founders on the pre-mine. So that's, I believe, 3 people who split 20%. So I believe that's added to the circulating supply, and I think that's actually inaccurate circulating supply metric. But
Okay.
that's a different science. I'm not a forensic analyst on the XRP ledger, so I don't know exactly who what has, where's what stored, right?
But
But
there were also a lot of missing parts. There was the refactoring of the code after the launch. There was the missing blocks. There were, I mean, the word of the founder with Jab McCallum getting out. It was a mess. There was like
Mhm.
of sure. I guess that Matt and other Ripple enthusiasts will probably deny some part of it.
Well, he
But there is the BitMEX research that is can be, I think, broken down and commented. And the BitMEX research about the initial story of Ripple is pretty interesting about how did this pre-mine go. But yeah, even if it was completely transparent, pre-mine is, I think, the worst way to create your own coin.
yeah.
If there was a federation a Bitcoin sidechain, federated sidechain, using the Ripple consensus mechanism, I will still context the mechanism, because I will say this is centralized and this can fail, which is the same thing I would say about Blockstream Liquid. I mean, Liquid is kind of centralized, and to shut down Liquid is pretty easy. So I'm glad that we still have, I mean, Liquid can be used for some use cases, but I'm glad that we still have the censorship resistant blockchain on the other side. So if you want to create a Ripple style consensus mechanism as a sidechain, let's do that. I will have some kind of skepticism about the model, but that's not will be an accusation of unethical behavior. But if you create your own coin, which is centralized and pre-mined, and you sell it to people, uh, I think that's ethically questionable.
Yeah, I agree. That's my biggest holdup on XRP. Even though Matt did put a lot of my greatest fears to rest, and we'll do this whole thing together. Let me ask you something that's going to be a small change in gears, Matt. Before we get to your thing, I'm going to just address Giacomo because we're talking about pre-mine. We're bashing XRP's pre-mine, us in our mind for justifiable reasons. So let's give you guys something to hold on to here. Giacomo, do you fear Satoshi's Bitcoin? What are your thoughts on Satoshi's Bitcoin? 850K to a million Bitcoin approximately mined by Satoshi when Bitcoin was in its infancy. And it's an elephant in the room, no matter which way you look at it, right? It's a lot of Bitcoin for one single entity to have.
Yeah. So first of
What are
all,
your thoughts?
First of all, the fact that they are Satoshis is a theory, is a pretty, in my opinion, is a pretty convincing theory. The first one to make an analysis about that was, I think, Sergio Lerner, but there were other analyses on top of that. It's not many people is taking that as a fact, but it's not a fact that Satoshi Nakamoto was the first major miner. There are actually some things suggesting that it was somebody else doing the mining after the code. The code was out before the Genesis block, and there are some clues that will actually go against this theory. But that matters relatively, because we would just move from Satoshi's coin to these people coin that
Yeah.
could be not Satoshi, but still will be a single entity or a very limited number of entities. Of course, that's a problem. That could be, I didn't mention that in the failure scenario of Bitcoin, but we could imagine that as another kind of one-shot
Yeah.
one-shot gun.
Yeah.
So let's assume, for example, there are some theories that Bitcoin was created by NSA. I don't believe conspiracy theories in general, and this looks particularly stupid to me. But I have very smart friends that are convinced of that. So in this theory, this kind of not pre-mined, because it was not pre-mined, but let's say early mined bitcoins
Hmm.
concentrated in few hands, this could be like a possible economical kill switch. Like you are the NSA,
Yeah.
you store 1.3 million of Bitcoin. Then when Bitcoin is going too strong, you can sell at marketplace, everything collapse in the price. Well,
Hmm.
the nice thing about this is, I mean, unlikely, but possible. The nice thing about this is that this is another one-shot attack.
Yep.
Either you do destroy Bitcoin with this, or you don't. I will say that the problem of having the creators of the systems and the maintaining of a UNL holding something like, I don't know, 80% of the total supply is really different from the problem of having possibly the creator of the system or somebody else maybe having access to what is probably at less than 10%, or
Yeah,
in
like
worst
5
crazy
approximately.
scenario, yeah, 5% approximately. It's still bad. 5% of the total supply sold at marketplace would hurt Bitcoin price very much. And
Yeah.
if done smartly, like if you create some kind of hype, then some FUD, then you crash the market with
Yeah.
this in a smart psyop, you can hurt Bitcoin pretty much. But again, you can do it once, not
Yeah.
twice.
Well, that's actually something that to me it's an elephant in the room that I'm not very scared of, because I'm a technical analyst, I'm a trader. I see Bitcoin as a fixed race, right? In fact, the stock market, look at quantitative easing. But long story short, if Satoshi Bitcoins, or let's just call him Satoshi's Bitcoin, if say he nukes the price, right? I would love to be sitting there and
Yeah,
waiting for Bitcoin to hit 14 pennies or $100. I'll tell you what, man. I would accumulate. I would accumulate, and 1 million Bitcoin distributed across multiple exchanges, executing sales at the same time to create equal selling pressure would be detrimental to the price, but it would be amazing for people like me, you, who understand that this is a possibility. Have your stop sell, and if there is a market collapse, buy your freaking Bitcoin for bottom dollar. Like
absolutely,
less
absolutely.
than Tonebase is predicting, less than anyone's predicting. It would be great to get a low cheap Bitcoin, but so
I agree with you.
and this is
Also, another thing about these address Satoshi's possible addresses is they are one of the kind of addresses possibly vulnerable to this super overhyped quantum computing thing. So if you know about quantum computing for real, you know that 99% of what people say is bullshit. Quantum computing is something that may be irrelevant for the next 2 centuries to cryptography. Basically, the idea
okay.
of using Shor algorithm to break down a CDSA is a very, very science fiction. So I will not be surprised that I finish my life without any of these even getting any close to reality. But if it happened, which is very unlikely but possible, then Bitcoin protected by the new forms of addresses like P2SH or P2PKH where you don't have the public key, but you have the hash of the public key or the hash of the script or the hash of the weakness. These are protected not just by elliptic curve cryptography, but also by hash. And hash function is not reversible by definition. So quantum computing cannot reverse the hash function. But Satoshi's Bitcoin, they are not protected by an hash function. They are stored with the old pay to public key algorithm, which means that with this kind of short quantum attack on ACDSA, a quantum attacker could actually spend, in theory, Satoshi's Bitcoin. So even if the NSA doesn't have is not this entity, the NSA with a quantum computer could spend probably, I don't know. There was an estimation by right now on Twitter. There is a SIPA, Peter Willa, estimating how many Bitcoin are stored in addresses where the public key is known, which is something like I think 5 million, something like 5 million Bitcoins, which is a lot. So
Mhm.
yeah, this event is extremely unlikely, but it will be very funny to watch.
Yeah, yeah. And again, it's a one-time deal. Like getting perma bulls to sell and getting, investors to buy is all it's going to do is redistribute. I don't think it's an end game scenario. I just can't see that happening. Selling 1 million Bitcoin at a penny is 100 grand, right?
Yeah,
Less. That's 10 grand. So
to
I
be fair,
mean, if you had 10 grand and you were sitting with a limit buy at zero point zero 0.01 zero point zero 0.01 US dollar, you would accrue, with 10K, you could get 1 million Bitcoin. I think it would be a great opportunity. I wouldn't mind that. But
sure.
let's see. So Matt is
To a
kind of.
certain degree, to be fair, this applies also to XRP supply.
Hmm.
So it's correct to say that even if Ripple wanted to sell everything on the market, it will probably crash the market momentarily. But that's that it will just redistribute XRP. The
Yeah.
the the likes the objection to the concentration of money in the hands of the single entity is more that it creates an easy way to fake the market cap at all. The objection is not that if Ripple people sold everything, they will destroy Ripple forever. Probably
Hmm.
not.
Yeah.
But the point is that the current market cap is calculated out of the fake price, basically.
Yeah, my this is probably one of the biggest things that has upset me with Ripple. And Matt, I hope you're listening because this is something that I thought was really interesting. It has one job with that escrow, and that is to secure contracts to make the XRP ecosystem better. Now, it failed and it lost a major contract to XLM, IBM XLM. It lost to JED, the copy paste of XRP, the diluted XRP with even more concentration of wealth. If what I've been told is correct, if my understanding is correct, Jed owns more than the founders and Ripple, the company, were awarded in the Genesis block. So I think it's kind of weird that Ripple lost this. The Ripple's appealing to financial institutions. It has an escrow account filled with 60% of the supply, and it didn't lock down this amazing opportunity. And XLM took the headlines. Like I just can't
Yeah,
believe that happened. It brings in an extra layer of questionability to me in terms of what the goal of a pre-mine is. If it is to benefit, like XRP or Ripple, the company says, the pre-mine is only going to be used, it's going to be put in an escrow account. We're going to allocate this to the betterment of XRP. Why wasn't it done, right? Like they're pulling out 1 billion per month, they're putting back in, they pull some out, they distribute it, whatever, and then they pull it back, whatever isn't used. I just can't believe Ripple lost this. It tells me that there's an extra layer to the thought process behind how they allocate those escrow funds. I don't think that's very sound. I think that sounds very central, right? If they were like, oh, you know what, we want to wait for Ripple to hit $3 again before we start really dealing with this escrow account. That's really bad in my opinion. They lost 6 banks, and that's exactly what Ripple wants. They want banks to be onboarding this product. So I'm a little upset by that in terms of what a pre-mine and an escrow account are supposed to be doing for that particular ecosystem. But now.
yeah. There are, I mean, there are a lot of layers. So far, we discussed the technology, and I expressed my skepticism about the technology. Not really about the technology, but the way the technology is sold. This is a federation sold as something decentralized, which is unfair as a promotion. And on top of that, we discussed the problem of the asset. So the first problem of the asset is that it's an altcoin, and this is a problem by definition, in my opinion. The
Mhm,
second problem is that it's a premined altcoin,
mhm,
and the third problem is that it is a premined altcoin with very, very shady logics of premine, difficult to dig and difficult to really assess. Of course, there are other layers of objections you could have on top of Ripple as a global brand. For example, I am personally very, very let's say negatively biased toward Ripple because in my job I consulted clients in the same table with Ripple representative, and these Ripple representative were basically misrepresenting uh, anything about Ripple. They were promoting a private version of Ripple without any kind of Ripple consensus of use of XRP as the new evolution. So centralization was sold as the new evolution to benefit the bank more, which it was crazy unsound marketing. And then at the same time, they were still promoting XRP as an investment, even if the tool they were selling was a tool that was not using XRP at all, because it was a completely centralized version of the tool, even more centralized than the system, as I commented so far. So there is this layer, and on top of this there is also the social media layer of the astroturfing that especially if you follow him on Twitter, there is Geoff Goldberg. He
Mhm.
made a lot of very nice analysis about Ripple promoters. Of course, it doesn't mean that, I mean, Matt, if Matt is bullish about Ripple technology, this doesn't mean that he has any kind of responsibility in astroturfing on Twitter. So it's not a global responsibility to everybody, but it is a fact that right now the researchers have discovered a pretty impressive
Yeah.
astroturfing operation on Twitter with a lot of accounts with no interaction. And I mean, if you analyze the graphs, you can really see what we are talking about.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm hoping one day, Jeff is an amazing, smart individual, very busy. So we'll give him some time to keep working before I grab him by the arm and say, "Get on camera with me." But I do agree. I think there is an issue with when you're talking bots. The research right now, which is extremely accurate and worth listening to, even if you guys, I see in the chat this is an XRP dominated chat right now. They're not liking us right now. So point is though that that if you have on social media bots and and other individuals blindly supporting and retweeting ringleaders, then what you're going to have is an artificial support. And when you have artificial support, that leads to much more zealotry and much more belief in a system that may or may not have credence or have credit to its actual network, its software, whatever. So I do think
Yeah.
there's some issues. All right, Matt is asking a question too. Giacomo, what are you? Oh, well, Matt. We might need to go into those things because I know Giacomo. We're running. We're running low on time here, and Giacomo, you're a busy man. You have a life, so I don't want to keep you forever.
But
But
Matt, we will. I'm more than available to come back in the direct debate about that. Maybe if we want to decouple single topic about the consensus protocol, the altcoin concept per se, and the pre-mine, etc., we can discuss about that.
yeah,
We
it
don't
would
have
be
to unpack everything.
technicals. Super technical, academic. I mean, this is the thing. I want to just point out to the XRP community right now. I would say that there was a lot more support for academic discussion when it was with Matt, but the second that we bring in academic discussion on the other end of the fence, there's a lot more hostility. So I think that you guys need to look at yourself, like take a look in on that one, because what I'm trying to create here is an academic space, not a troll space where you can agree with one person vehemently and then deny the other side of the coin. That's not what we're doing here, and you're not going to gain anything out of this if that's all you're paying attention to is the sounds that you want to hear. So on
So
that note,
Joe, let me say something nice about Ripple, so I
uh,
can I can
yeah,
try to still explaining a little bit Ripple. I think that Ripple was particularly interesting at the beginning when Ripple was. So it's particularly funny to me that somebody could be contemporary, a very harsh critic of Lightning Network, and a great fan of Ripple, because Ripple as a concept, when it started actually before Bitcoin, the original Ripple payment system was a very nice idea that was pretty similar to what Lightning Network is. So the idea was to have this open source system to Ripple to basically to route debt and obligation. So I owe you, for example, $3. I represent this debt to you as the in this system as a debt of $3. Then if you have debt with somebody that has debt and that has debt, you can basically, they call it Ripple.
yeah,
You can
rippling.
yeah, you can wrote this debt in a way that can basically create some kind of multi-party cleaning. This is very similar to the idea of Lightning Network. Actually, Lightning Network is the idea of moving from one-to-one payment channel of Satoshi Nakamoto to actually a routed system. So it I would say that, I mean, there is not an explicit reference in Lightning Network white paper to Ripple, but in because probably Taj and Joseph, they weren't directly influenced, but they should be a mention of the original Ripple system as a precedent, because it was a precedent. Of course, I think that Lightning Network is different because the main problem, the reason Ripple system originally didn't take off was that without any kind of strong collateralization, the game theory of this kind of debt rippling is bad, because let's assume that I'm connected to my daughter, she's 10 months old and she owes me $3, and then you are the CEO of Goldman Sachs, and I can easily decide the rate of rippling between my daughter and you, and that could be very basically creates an incentive, which is a little bit Grisham law like, in which basically bad debt start to drive off the market good debt very quickly because of the incentives. So I do think that the model is actually broken, but it was very interesting. It was so interesting that it did it was mentioned by Satoshi Nakamoto as one of the other interesting experiments going on in the field of decentralized money. So there is a quote by Satoshi. It is not about XRP and the new
Mhm.
Ripple. It was about the original idea. Unfortunately, the original idea never took off. So they rebranded it as with the altcoin XRP, with a lot of rebranding, and I really don't like the new rebranding. But the original, what was the name of the company? Ripple Pay, the Ripple Pay protocol was, in my opinion, mm, I mean, a great piece of intellectual work in the field of decentralized money.
Mhm. Yeah, so I agree. I believe innovation wherever it comes from. I don't care if it's XRP. I don't care if it's XYZ. Whatever. I will say I'm a firm believer in free market innovation, right? And whatever that in whatever form that presents itself through competition, through various other means, I accept it, right? But there's in this space, the part of the problem, in my opinion, is when you're buying a stock, right? A company has to prove that it's doing something, and it goes through all these security tests through the SEC and CFTC, whatever the case is, and then it has to, before it is allowed to make money on selling shares, which are pieces of the company, it has to prove that it's worth a damn, right? And so when you have this space filled with crypto, and all you have are people that essentially want to replicate the experiment of turning something from fractions of a penny into 20K over the course of 9 years, well, all you're going to do is prey on people's hope, and that's very different than in an organic ecosystem of people contributing to a protocol, and then
Yeah,
the other, if there's just so many angles to this. I do believe in innovation, and innovation is the Lightning Network. Innovation is SegWit. Innovation is all kinds of things that have been introduced as Bitcoin improvement proposals. So I think a lot of altcoins are already just off my list because they're greedy. They're money grabs. If you want to innovate, I've seen anonymous people post Mimblewimble with its Harry Potter references, and they had nothing to gain, right?
yeah.
But then you have altcoin Golden or some BS garbage, and they're like,
Yeah.
oh, they're
Oh,
intentionally vague about what they
about,
serve.
about Wimble, which is especially incredible is that both the anonymous creator, pseudonymous creator of the idea of Wimble, and the first people working on Wimble, for example, Andrew Polstra of Blockstream, they spent a lot of time, a lot of money actually, because time material of Andrew Polstra is a lot of money
Mhm.
on implementing the idea of Wimble, making scale with Lightning, and they could have launched a Wimble altcoin at any point since basically since 2017, and they didn't. and
Uh-huh.
they waited, and somebody else came after to monetize aggressively
Uh-huh.
this kind of research with green and
Yeah,
beam
green. Yeah.
and so on. And I mean, the difference is actually a difference in mentality and approach and in ethical standards, because it's not that the beam people or the green people were the first to be able to launch a Mimblewimble altcoin. It was trivial to do for Andrew or for Blockstream 2 years before. They didn't, because they are still waiting to launch it as a sustainable, long-term, honest, game theoretically sound Bitcoin sidechain. That's the reason they didn't jump on the money horse in between. So
Mm-hmm.
just another quick comment. Since you mentioned the free markets and competition, I think there is a huge misconception about Bitcoin maximalists,
Mm-hmm.
like ourselves, about this free market and competition thing, because there are two layers of discussion. There is one layer in which you talk about the market process, and you state if you do like the market process, if you do believe in the market process. And then there is a second layer in which you are actually part of the market process. So in the first layer, I say I don't like government censorship. I like writers to be able to write the novel that they want. But if I am a writer, there is a second layer in which I say I like competition of writers, I like free press,
Mm-hmm.
but I dislike this book. I think that books should be written this way. I want to write book this way. I don't like this genre for personal or objective or reasons that I want to present as objective. So we don't have to conflate this. Bitcoin maximalists or the Bitcoin maximalists I know and I identify with, they are not asking for any kind of external force imposing Bitcoin over alternatives. So the appreciation for market forces and market selection and competition is embedded in our basic framework. So first thing is, let's people compete. That's something no maximalist is against. Inside this competition, we bring a strong value proposition, which is inside the framework of the competition. So it's not like you shouldn't compete. Is let's compete, and inside this competition, I state the reason for which this choice is better than this one. For example, if you come to me and you say, "Oh, hey Giacomo, I created a new internet, so just ditch TCP/IP and use the new internet," I will not say you should be arrested because it must be protected by law. I will say
Uh-huh.
competition is great. Let's go with it. Personally, I'm skeptical and I will not invest my money. And I will tell
Mm-hmm.
people not to invest their money because my assessment of the successful probability of your new internet, given network effects and blah, 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 is basically zero. So since I think you will fail because of the technical choice and economical choice you made, I'm not willing to invest in the new internet. I will tell other people not to. And if you are lying about something while proposing that, I will just call out what I think are lies or inaccuracies and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
it's not about become maximalist is not about being against competition. It is about being in favor of competition and having a horse in that competition at the
Yeah.
same time. So we have to. It's like inception. There are
Mm-hmm.
meta discussion. Uh, we love the free market, but we are part of the free market. And as part of the free market, I love the free market, and I will take my part in the free market, explaining what I think is better or worse, or true or not true,
Mm-hmm.
or effective or ineffective.
Yeah, I'm going to take that one step further and say, as a Bitcoin maximalist, it's also to me the burden of proof. Bitcoin was created, right, and it does all these beautiful things. Therefore, the burden of proof. If someone's coming to me with XYZ coin saying, "Yo, this is a better application of currency," the burden of proof is on you, not me,
Yeah,
right? I'm already
yeah,
participating in a global decentralized peer-to-peer network. There might be some issues. There might be some some criticisms, but there it's definitely not a blatant money grab. It's definitely not a delusional innovation. So if someone like Tron is coming up to me, Justin Son of Tron is trying to show me Tron, I'm going to say, well, what are you doing here, man? You copied a white paper and now you're selling it to the world. Like the burden of proof is on you to convince me that you copied a white paper for a justifiable reason, XYZ. You know, you did all your due diligence. I need you to convince me that what you have is better because there's
Yeah.
already something that exists that
Yeah, I
exists.
give you another example. I am, as I said, as an education, I'm a theoretical physicist. So when you go in the field of theoretical physics, there is a lot of crackpots. So there is an established, let's say, kind of established model, which is arguably wrong, which is a standard model, which has a lot of holes and inconsistencies and problems. And then uh, there is a people working of these problems, and people just coming by and spitting out crazy theories. Crazy. I mean, you can find a website with hundreds and hundreds of grand unification theories that don't make actual sense. So it would be wrong to say that a knowledgeable theoretical physicist is close-minded and against competition, because basically the physics changed a lot in the last
Yeah,
100 years, and anytime there was a paradigm change, and there was some, of course, there was some natural inertia and some resistance to paradigm change, but then eventually the new evidence will shatter down the old
yeah,
paradigm, and so physics evolve. But there is also an incredible amount of people that wants to, that has some kind of visibility gain or psychological gain in presenting themselves as the new Schrödinger, the new Dirac, when they are not. So you can find hundreds and hundreds of crackpot physical theory. You can say this is crackpot. It doesn't mean that you are against competition in science. If you are a scientist, you must be for competition in science, because science is
hmm
all about falsifiability. You
yeah,
cannot have a right theory. You can only have wrong theories that can disproven over time. That's
yeah.
all the scientific method is about. But you can say
My,
this theory is crackpot. What is the main difference? That we don't care a lot about crackpot physics because there is not a strong monetary incentive to create the crackpot physical theories. So there are hundreds of people creating crackpot physical theories, but the most they gain is maybe they sell some books, but it's not real money. The problem with Bitcoin is that the incentive to create the crackpot new monetary system is so intense right now that there is like the kind of scam bubble we are seeing. So it's a problem of how easy it is to monetize low quality work and high quality marketing in the altcoin sphere.
So understood. I will just quickly, like as a theoretical physicist, speaking to one, I'm going to tell you my first lesson that I learned from my physics teacher, and I never forgot it. He said, "What is the definition of science?" And everyone kind of just said, "What?" He said, "It's the observation of natural phenomena with the technology at the given point in time." And it was the most beautiful explanation to me. Physics and science is a black hole of understanding that is continually changing, right? It's evolving.
Yeah.
So I love that idea. And maybe one day if we ever have a sit down in person, maybe I could hear more about your exploration of the realm of physics. But I would like to close this out if that's where we're headed. I would like to close this out with one last question to you. I would like to see, as with you as kind of like this technical expert in Bitcoin, give some Bitcoiners some hope here. What does the future? What's like 3 years of Bitcoin look like to you? What's the adoption looking like? What's the Lightning Network? What's it, how is that developing? Do you have like any sort of theories as to like a 3 year roadmap that increases Bitcoin's adoption or anything like that? Any sort of insight into the future?
Yeah, so the first kind of trend that I see or I hope to see is actually one that many people will not like at all, including many very good Bitcoin developers, which is ossification of the base protocol. I do think that Bitcoin can reach reliability of adoption and stability of standardness and resistance to government attacks only if it reaches some kind of long-term stability at the base layers, which means sacrificing a little bit the innovation, or just moving it. I mean, innovation is not it doesn't disappear, but it has to move to upper layers. and that's basically, that does mean that I think we will see in the next 1 year to 3 years some very nice soft fork in the consensus, especially to change the script model. So we will probably, I hope we will see Schnorr signature and the Sigash no input to enable L2, which is a better way to do Lightning Network in a more secure and easy way, also with a multi-party channel. So Sigash no input is very cool. Schnorr is also very important because it's a very nice signature scheme, more efficient, but also it can, with signature aggregation, it can incentivize the coin join of Satoshi. So right now we can coin join with Wasabi on join market because we want to, but we cannot coin join because we get money if we do that. But with Schnorr, we can get money from coin joining, which is something that changes privacy completely, because now you have a plausible deniability. Why are you coin joining? Because you want to hide something? No, because this is just the more convenient path to save money on fees. So there will be these kind of changes. Also, Taproot is great. The scriptless script is another thing enabled by Schnorr. So after these changes, I hope to see the base protocol ossifying more and more, moving all the innovation on top layers where they are safer to, it's safer to experiment. A second trend connected to this is the UX trend. So right now, Bitcoin is traditionally has been doing huge sacrifices about UX. For example, I remember 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago, looking at the MetaMask extension for Chrome with in Ethereum, and I was speaking with some guys in Bitcoin. I said, "Well, this is great user experience. Why cannot a Bitcoin wallet be as nice as MetaMask? You go on a website and you basically click a button and you pay because it's all integrated in the browser. This is beautiful. Let's do something like that." And they started to take my question seriously, and they showed me all the security problem that were connected with this kind of nice user experience in Bitcoin. But that was about the base layer. About the top layers like Lightning Network, finally you can be more reckless, because Lightning Network is about small channels, small payments. There are limits in the money you can put in the channel. So if you take the Joule extension, which is a Lightning Network wallet as Chrome extension, finally we can see the same amount of nice UX that we were seeing on some altcoins or some legacy. I mean, if you use Cash App or Root and then use Bitcoin, clearly the UX is superior in centralized system. But with upper layer, you can have finally nice UX. So I hope that we will see ossification of the base layer and a lot of nice UX on the second layer. And the third kind of trend I would really like to see is to Bitcoin going finally. It's already happening. Bitcoin going beyond the internet. So right now, Bitcoin is like a protocol on top of the internet protocol. It's the internet of money. So it's like you have TCP, IP, TCP, HTTP, and BTC as a new protocol. But it would be nice to actually have Bitcoin going beyond that, because the internet is great, but it was built in a way that was not really looking to censorship resistance and to privacy. There were some major problems with the internet concept because it was not thought with your government as an adversary. And so it's we have to use Tor VPNs to keep it censorship resistant, which is kind of difficult. But there are like ISP, internet service provider, are very easy to censor, to shut down. If you are in China, it's possible to overcome the firewall, the Great Firewall, but it's dangerous.
Oh, Giacomo, we might have lost you for a bit. All right. Well, I'm just going to take this time to say, anyone in the comments, I'm going to stick around for at least another 10-15 minutes after I say a formal goodbye to Giacomo if he does come back. I'm looking at a question right now, and let's see. Regardless of whether you agree with Ripple's practices, do you feel they are going to fail? All right, XRP Booger. This question I'm going to answer, and I'm going to say it's kind of twofold. All right. regardless of whether I disagree or agree, right? Excluding everything, I think there, as the case against them. Um, one sec. Like, so there's legal cases against them. If the cases against them end up ruining them, I think Ripple is going to be hurt. But like Matt said, the XRP ledger is not tied to Ripple. So I um I I would say Ripple, and Matt has made it clear, and I'm going to go with Matt on this one, that he says if Ripple is and XRP are two separate one sec. Um so yeah, all right. So it looks like Giacomo isn't able to return. So I'm going to say to hit your question, XRP booger. Um I think whatever happens in court is going to be a precedent, an interesting precedent. Um is XRP a security is going to be the second level, right? And right now there is a class action lawsuit alleging Ripple engaged in securities fraud. I think a lot is going to rely on how that all plays out, and I'm not sure how it's going to play out. We have the SEC cracking down in some instances, and we have the SEC saying we can't crack down in some instances. Now, XRP, let's just assume that all the numbers are correct and it is a top 5 market cap cryptocurrency. Maybe the SEC is going to lay off and maybe just find the founders or find the company, and it's going to be, not that it's not going to nuke the system. Well, then you have yourself a pretty good situation. You have yourself a pretty good, I would say you have a good outlook on the future of Ripple in that scenario, and XRP. So let's keep moving down the list. 1 out of 2. This is coming from network marketing. Actually, no DAC, low Jack. One thing that is certain, banks will have to play nice. If they kill existing coins, they will kill blockchain adoption. Well, the thing is, blockchain, not necessarily blockchain as altogether, but Bitcoin is an attack on banks, central banks in particular. So I am expecting that to be a war at some point. If it isn't already, if there isn't some sort of, let's call it Wall Street manipulation in the price across the board in cryptocurrency. Who knows? Who knows? This is all speculative. But their blockchain, I would say I'm not aware of any amazing blockchain applications. To me, when I hear about blockchain food and blockchain salmon and blockchain cattle, I think it's kind of ridiculous. I don't think that it makes a lot of sense to try to track things on a blockchain when all you need is a barcode and a database and a username and a password. It just makes no sense to me. Why would you use an inefficient system, which is designed to be inefficient, in order to track something that can be, messed with either way, falsified documentation and all that. So let me. You guys are moving fast here. Network marketing, SRL. In the end, I have to say that this misunderstanding on XRP is a benefit for me. I could take advantage of it to create wealth for my family and friends. We arrived so early that when the populace starts talking about XRP, we at XRP Army will already have gone to retirement. That could very well be the case. I've seen some paid group leaders, some shillers, say that XRP will hit $20. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. I think the biggest elephant in the room with XRP is that 60 million sitting in the founder's laps, the company in escrow, not to mention the amount in the founder's lap. So I don't know what's going to happen to price. I would say technical analysts with those external variables, I always look at a technical picture as well as an external narrative. So we'll have to see. I'm really curious to see what that kind of concentration of wealth does. I think that absolute power corrupts absolutely, and that's part of my belief as to why Ripple lost this massive headline recently. So let's see. Classified as an XRP whale in a few years? Absolutely possible. Question: do you think Bitcoin will survive if used outside the circle of collectors and antiquities? Yeah, I think Bitcoin is a store of value. It's an excellent store of value. It's the criticism could be, well, we hit 20K and we are down 80 or so percent right now from the all-time high. Well, you have 100% downtime. You have crypto, or not cryptos, you have fiat in Venezuela, let's say, where you, in between sessions at the bar, you go to the bar and you buy your beer. Well, the bartender says, hey, next one's going to be double. You just lost 100% of your buying power over the course of 15 minutes. So in an 80% bubble pop over the course of a year and change, isn't that threatening relative to hyperinflating countries and where Bitcoin is probably needed the most? In the United States or in Western civilizations, cryptocurrency is more of a want than it is a need, right? It's more of an investment. It's not like we need it. It's not like right now, today, I have to hedge my bet against fiat. So that, I hope, answers your question. XRP Booger, the reality is they are making steps to work with banks and governments, which some people may not like. Yes, I do not like that. I don't think that it's going to ultimately pan out. I do believe that there needs to be some sort of innovation. There's no reason why it should cost $60 to send Bitcoin, or to send fiat internationally. Actually, there is a reason. Is that there are a lot of middlemen, and every time money touches someone else's hands, they take a cut. So it's very inefficient to send money globally. Now, if you're talking about some sort of global stable coin where JPM, you're able to transact internationally for a fraction of a penny. We'll see. We'll see. I think that is a pretty big competitor to what XRP is doing, though, as well. Now, Viv, the price of XRP would be affected if the case against Ripple are negative. Ripple is a big part of the XRP ecosphere. I'm not qualified to comment on that, but I would assume that is the case. If Ripple goes down, then I would assume XRP is hurt. I don't know if it would be a crippling blow, but it might not be an end of times for Ripple, or for XRP. So yeah, that is something to consider. And even whether or not, um, let's say in my circle, Bitcoin circle, they say Bitcoin makes you your own bank, right? Well, I don't know if the same sentiment exists in XRP, but I encourage people to say to understand that if you are your own bank, then it also makes you your own money manager. These are things that these are risks that you have to calculate in your head. You have to be prepared for them. So if you do have some sort of inkling that Ripple's going down the tubes, the company is going to be convicted of securities fraud, it's going to be attacked, and XRP, the asset, might collapse as a result. Well, that's something you're going to have to prepare for in your own way. That's a whole separate topic, and we can talk about that if you want. Message me on Twitter, or email me, Joe at BLOCKTV. We can discuss it privately, or if the Ripple community wants to discuss that with me as a technical analyst, I will discuss that with you. All right, let's see. Ripple is pretty much in bed with the IMF and White House. Yep, it absolutely could be true. I'm not going to believe anything until I see everything. Right? It's like if you're selling a house and you have 30 people come to your house, and 30 people or 25 people say, "Oh, it's such a beautiful house. I could totally see myself living here. I would. I'm really interested. Let's exchange numbers." In the back of my head, I'm going to say, I'm not going to be like, oh, yes, I got 25, prospective buyers. I'm going to say, until I have a contract in my hand, this means nothing. These are words. So, be mindful of that. Let's see. Won't the masses be turned off if Bitcoin fails? If Bitcoin fails, big if, I mean, it's kind of it's a vague question. Will be turned off to what, cryptocurrency in general? Probably not, because there are so many factions in this space. Um, so yeah, Matt, be your own banker. I agree, and if being your own banker means be your own money manager, and that means be aware of all the external variables that can have an impact on your asset, and prepare for those eventualities. So let's see here. Ripple is talking to the SEC on a weekly basis. This is said by Brad Garlinghouse. Well, again, the same analogy that I said about selling a house. I don't trust words very much. And in a space, I trust facts, and the facts are Ripple is currently in court for securities fraud. That, to me, how that plays out is going to be very important for the future of Ripple and probably many other crypto or altcoins, not cryptocurrencies. I think it's going to be interesting for, in particular, to a lot of ICOs. It's not going to really affect Bitcoin. Bitcoin's already a decentralized peer-to-peer asset, and it acts on a global scale. I don't think any single entity really is capable of nuking Bitcoin, and obviously that's all speculation. So we don't want to go too deep down that rabbit hole right now. I hate when the media talks about 85% down with crypto to scare people. Well, yeah, yeah, relative to 20K, it's down. In 9 years' time, it hit from a value of 0.00 to a value of $20,000, right? That's like unbelievable. By the almost like the beginning of the ninth year of its existence, right? And so relative to the all-time high being down 80 something percent is terrible, right? And people are destroyed, people's pockets, people rage quit, people lost all their money on BitMEX, gamblers, I consider futures trading gambling a little more. So yeah, it's a hurt. It's a big hurt, and the media definitely likes to sensationalize on emotion. So relative to 0.00, it's up much higher, right? So, it just depends on when you bought Bitcoin relative to a certain point in time. You're going to be either extremely happy or extremely sad. And historically speaking, Bitcoin does have a tendency to bounce. It has a tendency to continue its upward trajectory. Um, Of course, you're welcome for the interview and answers. Pleasure to have you here. Nice trading setup you have there. Thank you. I'm a technical analyst. That's more of my area. I like to discuss the software stuff as well. I like to be as educated as I can, and I have the privilege of interviewing some brilliant minds. Um, no, actually, Matt, let's hit that. Let's hit that. Ripple is in court for securities fraud. Let me pull this up, Matt. I'm not looking at the comments, so give me 1 second. XRP Ripple court securities fraud. This is a class action lawsuit. So tried to move securities lawsuit to federal court. This is all over. If you go to Google and type in Ripple securities lawsuit, oh, maybe you're saying the word securities fraud itself. I'll do my due diligence there. I'll maybe I'll take a deeper look at that. If you're right, I'll apologize. Okay. Well, an unregistered security is securities fraud. And I'm not a lawyer. And let's say that maybe I'm overstepping the line, and I'll dig a little deeper, and I apologize if I'm wrong. So let's leave it at that. I'll say that for sure. Um, Matt, while you're still around, Matt, let's talk. Maybe we can get a discussion where you and Giacomo can share the stage. I just want to mediate, make sure that that things move along, and no one moves off topic too far. So we'll try to set that up. I think that would be great for the community. Let's see, if the crypto community from XRP Booger, if the crypto community was going to choose a currency for mass adoption, we would have one. Most people don't know much about crypto and don't care. People with the power, i.e., banks and governments, will choose. Well, they call Bitcoin the money of the people. I don't necessarily think banks are going to have as much of an impact as people think. Like cryptocurrency, Bitcoin itself is an attack on banks. Keep that in mind. Yes. So Matt, I am aware of that, and I'll fall back. I'll fall back on that. I'm not going to push that. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I don't want to keep defending a position if I'm wrong. Uh, yeah. Well, we'll see what happens. Um, let's see here. Let's see. Just turned in multiple cryptocurrencies wouldn't be around barter system. I think there will be multiple that people can have their favorites and will just convert. Atomic swaps is what you're referring to, I believe. Sean W. Um, Maybe there is a multi-coin ecosystem in the future. I do believe this is a competitive space, and I do believe the SEC is probably going to start cracking down pretty hard at some point. I think there's going to be a dot-com bubble in the future. To me, altcoins are divided into a couple different categories: delusional innovations, blatant money grabs, and I think that that's a lot. I'm not saying Ripple is either of those two right now. I think that Matt did educate us that Ripple is more than just a pre-mined money grab, and I'm going to accept his words there because he is a very smart individual. And until proven otherwise, I'm going to say maybe there was some sort of altruistic reason for it. But I am naturally skeptical of central authorities with massive stake in a crypto in a pre-mine, right? I just cannot. There's just to me, there's absolutely no reason to pre-mine and to sit on it like that. To sit on it as long as they have, it's for many years now. For they basically control it for 6 years. Long time to still have 60% of a total supply. Not to mention, I don't know what the founders have, and I don't know where that is. If the founders are sitting on Bitcoin or on XRP, to me that should not be considered part of the circulating supply unless they're trading it. But let's see here. Money legal tender is law of gov or its banks. Not anymore. For the first time in human history, it's not. It is a decentralized global peer-to-peer network. So that's just a slight difference. Satoshi mined millions of Bitcoin, not millions, but Satoshi did mine Bitcoin in isolation. And for all we know, he or she or they have thousands of wallets with multi-millions of Bitcoin. But because Ripple is being clear and open, they are attacked. That's not quite what's going on. There's a difference. You need to understand. There's a difference between creating, inventing a whole new thing altogether, which was Bitcoin and blockchain, right? Cryptocurrency, and being the only person that was mining it. Someone was like, hey, I'm inventing this, and there was like some collaboration between other devs and brilliant other individuals. So and then he created a genesis block and a protocol and a fixed issuance, and whoever mines the block receives a block reward. And if for the first few years of Bitcoin there was very little adoption essentially, and therefore a centralization of wealth, well, that's uncontrollable. We don't know what's going to happen, though. We have no idea what's going to happen with that. That's an elephant in the room. I agree with you. It's interesting, um, but I don't. I speculate that I prepare for it to be a nuke, and in that instance, I'll be buying Bitcoin at the bottom. If it's not a nuke, and Satoshi reveals himself one day in the future as a supreme leader, monetary leader of the world, we'll have to see what happens then. That's all speculative talk, though. People don't have a right to uniformly, equitably on exchanging their labor for whatever token. Okay. Uh, that's more of a, I guess, political style thought process. I'm not really going to go into politics. As you are a Bitcoin maximalist, what do you think of Digibyte? If you have a representative of Digibyte that wants to come forward and do an interview, I'll speak with them. That's as far as I'll go. I'll give them their say. Did you catch that Google Trends shows altcoin searches are nearing an all-time high? I did not catch that, but that is interesting. That is interesting. Some people say the bottom is in, and if the bottom is in, then that means that altcoin season is next, and bull season after that, right? So that's a really big speculation as well. As an analyst, I'd say that's excellent information. What am I going to do with it? I'm going to pay attention. Litecoin surging recently. Did Charlie buy the bottom and sell the top? I don't know. A lot of speculation here. I don't know what's going on, but I am saying, according to my analysis, I believe that the bottom is not in, and I believe we're going lower. So I'm going to play as a when you're if anyone out there is a technical analyst, you've probably learned by now that you don't listen to other technical analysts too much because it really clouds your judgment. You have one guy saying buy, you have for some reasons, you have some guy saying sell for some reasons, and the worst part is each person can make complete sense. I can pitch to you an argument that the bottom is in, and I can give you such an amazing argument to say that the bottom is in, and I can give you some freaking amazing bull porn. It's gonna blow your mind, and then you're gonna want to buy. And then on the other hand, I can give you an amazing bear porn chart where I could say the bottom's not in, and this is X Y Z Y. So, like to me, I'm just going to play what I believe, and maybe we can do a show on why I believe the bottom is not in. Sometimes I debate that with other people. If that's what you guys want, this is a community forum, right? So you guys ask me for stuff. You guys tell me what you want to see. Obviously, I'm not going to censor anything just because there's a lot of people that were saying lies and this and that. Well, I'm not going to stop the conversation, So anyways, if the top 10 wallets hold their Bitcoin for 20 years as a store of wealth, why is that any different than Ripple holding XRP? Why should that not be in total supply? Thanks. All right. So if top 10 wallets hold their Bitcoin for 20 years as a store of wealth, why is that any different than Ripple holding XRP? Well, Ripple holding XRP is a little different because it's supposed to be promoting the adoption of XRP. With that XRP they have an escrow. And that's one of the things that got me so upset about this IBM bank collaboration. Maybe Ripple does have all these relationships, 200 banks or so. I'm not really seeing that happen, like to have much impact. If 200 banks are using Ripple, then they should be reducing the scarcity of the available supply, and Ripple should not be trading at pennies or 30 cents or whatever it is right now. So let's see here. Why would that be? Why would that not be in total supply? Well, it is in total supply. I'm talking about circulating supply. If the founders pre-mined, which they did, all right. So when XRP was created, 80% went to Ripple, the company, 20% went to the founders. Now, if you have founders that are sitting on 20% of the total supply, so that adds 20 billion to the market supply. Let's say that adds 20 billion XRP to the circulating supply. Well, that means that the calculated global market cap is much higher, and that makes Ripple look much more powerful relative to other cryptocurrencies. And the problem is, if you start doing things that make something look better than it actually is, it causes a false sense of consumer confidence. And if it doesn't actually deliver on its promises, then the bubble that ensues will have such a negative impact on the investors that were trusting these numbers and believing in this company. It would be terrible to beautiful people across the world who have lost their money to a liar, a scammer, whatever, right? And this has happened numerous times, not just XRP, obviously. There are scammers in the space and they lose money. Beautiful people lose money. Good people that, look at the guy that was moving his money to Canada easily so that he didn't have to worry about all these taxes or whatever. And then QuadraGax exit scammed on him. He wasn't unable to withdraw his $400,000 life savings since his request to do so in October, well before QuadraGax or whatever that exchange Quadriga CX or something. All I'm saying is there's a lot of bad stuff going on in this space, and And that's why I have such a skeptical filter. That's why, to me, the burden of proof is always going to be on the other individual. Look at my interview with BlockFi. They were promising 6.2% compounding monthly interest returns. The burden of proof is on them to prove that they are not a scam. Like, people have fallen for this stuff countless times in the crypto community and have been burned. So when you have someone coming out saying, "Hey guys, we're promising these amazing numbers that other scam artists have promised, but we're not a scam," well, guess what? I need you to prove it to me, and the community. That's what I'm here to do. I'm a voice in media, and I'm trying to say, everyone, let's get the truth extracted from these various people, right? So, anyways, all right. Does Chinese centralization worry me? Now, we talked about this briefly. Chinese there's a difference between mining pool operators and mining facilities. Mining facilities in China account for a large number. That is an elephant in the room. Chinese mining pool operators, if a dude in his man cave is the mining pool operator of, let's say, say I'm in China, say Joe Saz is in China, and I'm the leader of Joe Saz pool, and I have all this hash allocated to my mining pool. Well, that doesn't mean that there's that much hash in China. That just means that I am the owner of a mining pool that has access to this much hash. That is not very scary to me. Does If China had mining facilities that were all state sponsored, shenanigans, and they were capable of influencing the pathways to making Bitcoin, a better decentralized anonymous peer-to-peer network, if they were a threat to that, then yeah, I would be very worried. But so far, I haven't seen any threats like that. So I'm not too worried about that yet. My father was an old. This is from No Dak. My father was an old commodities trader. I'm over 50. I entered 1 month ago when I seen bottom in Dash. Waited years for this. Well, if you see a bottom, that's amazing. And if you catch a bottom, good for you. Dash, it's an altcoin. I'm not a gambler. To me, playing altcoins is gambling. I'd rather stick to what's working now. And that might even, I mean, that might include a handful of cryptocurrencies. But to me, the most important thing is decentralization. No, that's the only way to fight the enemy that exists, that needed to be fought. So if anything it has any part of it that is not decentralized at any point, I'm not playing ball with that one. Not even trading it. Not even to try to make money. Ripple got the banks to X current first and then on to X rapid. Maybe they will. Maybe they won't. I'm not seeing it. We need to see what happens. Words mean nothing to me. Words mean nothing. Yep, like the Federal Reserve. Yeah, Federal Reserve is garbage. It's the worst thing probably one of the worst things in human history, excluding disease. Um, False sense of confidence. Bitcoin to XRP to Bitcoin. I'm Bitcoin. Actually, so just so you guys know, whoever's listening, I was a trader when I first entered this space. I came here to make money. Um, I've traded XRP. Probably, I mean, I can't remember my. I used to have everything. Um, but I don't know, which cryptocurrencies I made money on, which ones I didn't. I'm pretty sure I made money on all of them because during that bull run, everything was going insanely volatile to the upside. So, things were looking good. But now that we're in a bear market, it was, if you anyone who stuck around and started doing research, they have a different understanding of the space now. So it looks like we're running out of questions. Viv says, "Did you read the European Central Bank tweet? As a central bank, we can create money to buy assets." Oh yeah, Viv, I want you to look at something called quantitative easing. Uh, if I can screen share, I will. All right, guys, I'm gonna give you something here. I'm gonna give you guys a little special treat. I hope you guys are ready for this. All right, all right. Let us see here. All right, so let's share screen. This is a chart of the S&P 500. I'm not looking at comments right now. Let me just pop my head over real quick. All right, Viv, I hope you're watching. This is SPX, S&P 500 index. These are 6-month candles. Each candle represents 6 months. Something interesting of note here, every time that we reached a sequential 9 sell, we had, and this is the most interesting thing to me, we had, if you look at the timing which is down on the bottom, you can see the timing down here move. This was the dot-com bubble. We had a technical picture that matched up perfectly with an external narrative. We had a crash. We regained consumer confidence. The market rebuilt, and we went into another 9 sell. And guess what? This was around the collapse, the financial collapse of 2008. So there we go, another technical picture lining up perfectly with an external narrative. And then we have something called quantitative easing introduced into into from by the Federal Reserve as a mechanism, and we'll look this up. We'll look this up right now. I want you guys to see the definition. The introduction of new money into the money supply by a central bank. So guys, what's happening here is when you add more fiat and when you inflate the amount of money in an economic ecosystem, you increase the amount of money, you reduce the scarcity of that money, causing an artificial increase in value of scarce assets. I'm going to pull this back. I'm going to pull this back to video, okay? Let's get back out here. Let's get back out here, and let's get back out here. All right. So what's happening there is when government starts printing more fiat, what happens is there is a reduction in scarcity of fiat. Therefore, there is an artificial increased scarcity of various other entities or assets. That's why you see the price of, your parents might say, "Oh, I remember when a box of cereal was 25 cents and now it's $5." Well, yeah, that's because they're printing a bus ton more money, right? The more money they print, the more scarce everything else gets. The more scarce stocks get, property, a lot of things. A lot of things. I mean, I don't want to list everything, but if you reduce scarcity in one area, you're going to increase scarcity in others. And the whole point of quantitative easing is to inflate the market, the value of it. So how long can this go on? Well, that's just another bubble waiting to pop. They can print as much as they want, but what's going to happen, as much as they can print as much fiat as they want, and what's ultimately going to happen is that's a fancy term for inflation, or let's say semi-hyperinflation. So yeah, we're at 22 trill. And here, look. All right, Viv, let's do this one. This is really important down here. We're up 450% monetary base from 2000. We're up monetary supply 206% from 2000. We're up treasury securities 643% from 2000, and currency and credit derivatives up 607% from 2000. Oh wait, did I end up? Did I share my screen? I'm not sharing my screen. Hold on. Well, you got the numbers, so you don't need me to share screen. But yeah, it's dangerous. Very dangerous time right now. I think that's why Bitcoin or crypto assets are probably going to be a very viable alternative store of wealth against fiat. So yeah, and it has been for a while, Viv. It's been manipulated. That's one thing that I study. I trade like I'm playing in a fixed race, and it's because we are. Anyone that is, the central bank is the ultimate authority, right? And that's why Bitcoin was created. It was created because Satoshi Nakamoto said banks have done illegal activity that have caused probably millions of people to be negatively impacted by this. People were kicked out of their houses, right? So yeah, I honestly, it's the concept of money and scarcity is very, very simple, right? If something is scarce and there's a demand for it, it is more valuable. Look at gold, right? It's hard to get, it's hard to acquire. Therefore, gold was a nice agreed upon store of value. People were able to transact with gold, and miners were able to mine gold and inflate the supply at a cost. That meant that in order for them to get gold, they had to spend gold to pay their workers and to pay for their machinery and maintenance and property and whatever. So there's this ecosystem where you have to, in order to get more of it, you have to sell it. So there really isn't a concentration of wealth until you have people siphoning gold out of the supply and hoarding it. So it's I think that's part of the importance as to why Bitcoin is able to be divisible by so many parts. And in a dystopian future where Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency gets overtaken, all the people have to do is fork and create a new one, or they just create a new one. So I really like the future that blockchain application in the form of currency is going to revolutionize the world. Yeah, and I love to teach. I'm happy to teach. I'm happy to help you guys. Again, I answer questions. I love to help. Peter Schiff, anti-crypto, said the only way future economies can survive is if we go back to the gold standard. Well, that's actually a really good point. Probably a big part of it, but we might be past the point of no return. Let's put it like this, guys. All right, hold on. Let's hit that one real hard, okay? Viv, the total gold market cap is $7 trillion. The total US debt is $72 trillion. We have the total supply of gold on planet Earth accounts for 10% of total US debt. Interesting. Very interesting. I think we might be past the point of no return. Gold ETF creator admitted every ounce of gold they sold was applied to 4 people, which is why these countries can't get their gold when they ask for it. It's not there. Probably. I mean, dude, there's big people playing big games here. To me, Bitcoin seems safer bet as a store of value, but won't go up as high as alts. Hard for me to put money in BTC when I think there will be bigger gains from others. Well, that's a gamble that you're going to have to take. But in a competitive debt resolution scenario on a global scale, I can tell you this. With 21 million Bitcoin maximum in circulation, it's going to mean that only 21 million people have a full Bitcoin if it was equally distributed, right? That's a cooperative scenario, and that's to 21 million people. There's 7 billion on the planet, and there's 360 million in the United States. There's millions elsewhere, of course, 1 billion in China, billion in India. So this is going to be a competitive race at some point. You think that the gains aren't there, the 10,000% moves? I disagree. I think that they're very much there. I really do. I think Bitcoin's going to be ridiculously high in value. I think I think it's not unrealistic to say a single Bitcoin's going to be worth millions. In fact, potentially higher. Who knows? But I believe wholeheartedly that I don't believe in McAfee's decline. I think that that's a little early. I think he jumped the gun. I think he got a little excited when Bitcoin was at 20K. I think the next major barrier is probably 20K. Probably going to do a cup and handle, fall back a little bit, pump back above it. And then I think the next, I look at hurdles as decimal points or commas, depending on where you are. The next hurdle to me is going to be the 6-figure number and where we land in there. Are we going to collapse? Are we going to hold? And then the next one is the next zero up. So let's just keep going up zeros. All right. Yep, value is subjective. Yes, and it's supply and demand. If there's demand for something, I mean, the reason why the Mona Lisa has value is because someone is willing to pay money for it. That's all. So, anyways, um, I think I'm starting to lose my steam here. I've been very unwell. I was in the hospital the other day. I'm still not recovered, and I have a long recovery ahead of me. So I'm kind of losing some steam here, and I have to rest. And I'm going to say, yeah, well, let's hit that Maduro thing. When he tried to get his gold back, you know, that was also the United States intervention. So there's a lot of moving parts there, a lot of moving parts. But goes to show you, be your own bank. You know, don't trust. You know. So thank you so much. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for your comments, and yeah, I'll set up the debate. I'm going to speak with Giacomo and Matt, and both of whom I respect greatly. And I'm going to look forward to a very positive debate there, and I'll make sure that we have a nice topic list, and you know we have two respectable individuals academically discussing technical points. I think that's what they both want too. Giacomo wants that. Giacomo doesn't want to argue with XRP bots on rage tweets, and Matt doesn't want to argue with raging Bitcoin maximalists. I think them two in a conversation is probably going to be much more powerful than every other Twitter debate that I've seen. So I'm looking forward to that. Very looking forward to that. Thank you so much for the good wishes, and I'm looking forward to more. You guys, please email me, please tweet or message me, whatever you want to do. I love your feedback, guys. This is what I want. I want this two-way street with the community that I love so much. So let's get this. Like hit me up anytime, guys. I'm here for you. All right. Block TV is here for you. All right. Um, on that note, looking forward to the debate. Thank you so much for the good wishes. Thank you so much for tuning in and your commentary. Looking forward to more of building a relationship with you all. All right. Take care now.